Hey everyone, welcome back. Previously we covered the Tier 1 of this Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg, and that took about 2 hours, I think. And well, today we'll be covering the Tier 2 of this iceberg, and it turned out to be even longer. In these 3 hours covering the Tier 2, we'll be discovering unsolved mysteries relating to mysterious and sudden disappearances of people. I'm trying to categorize them, but there's just too many different kinds of unsolved mysteries in this video. Other than disappearances, there's some disturbing crimes that are still unsolved. There are mysteries related to the supernatural as well, and also weird, unexplained phenomena like red rain and orange snow. So yeah, I guess let's just start with Tier 2's first entry, 2007 Siberian orange snow. In February 2007, a bizarre event took place in Siberia when orange-tinted snow began to fall in late January. This snow, described as oily and foul-smelling, had iron levels 4 times higher than usual and impacted around 27,000 residents. The cause of this peculiar snowfall is still uncertain. One theory attributes it to a severe sandstorm in Kazakhstan, evidenced by the presence of sand and dust particles in the snow. Another theory suggests that industrial pollution was the culprit, given the significantly elevated levels of acid, nitrates, and iron found in the snow. The abduction of Violet Ripkin. On the morning of July 24, 2002, 74-year-old Violet entered her garage and found a man with a handgun waiting for her. He bound and blindfolded her, shoving her into the back seat of her silver sedan. Nearly 12 hours later, a couple saw the silver sedan pull into a small neighborhood. The abductor got out of the vehicle, and the couple grew suspicious as he was wearing thick gloves in over 90-degree weather. They could faintly see the silhouette of an older woman with something over her head. When they questioned the man, he claimed she was his mother with Alzheimer's. Immediately after, he jumped back into the car and sped away onto a nearby freeway. The couple, convinced something was wrong, called 911 and gave the dispatcher the license plate number, which turned out to belong to Cal Ripken Jr., an MLB Hall of Famer who played for the Baltimore Orioles for about 20 years. The abducted woman, Violet Ripken, was his mother. Police searched the area for the vehicle and investigated Violet's home, finding nothing unusual. Neighbors were asked if they had seen anything strange, and one resident mentioned a pickup truck parked on their street a few days earlier. Authorities had not yet announced Violet's disappearance, but the next day, they held a press briefing to make the case public. On the 25th, Eric Snyder, a 28-year-old neighbor, took an unusual route home and spotted the silver sedan the police had mentioned. Inside, he saw an elderly woman waving a towel from a slightly open window and heard honking. Eric contacted the authorities, who successfully returned Violet home. Violet was unharmed and said the man was actually quite respectful. He initially wanted to put her in the trunk, but she begged him not to due to her claustrophobia, so he let her sit in the back seat. She mentioned they stopped for food frequently, and he even lit cigarettes for her. Police tracked the man's route based on eyewitness accounts, but couldn't determine a motive for the abduction, other than possibly money. In Violet's vehicle, there were various baseball-related items. Some believe the man abandoned her after realizing she was connected to a high-profile individual like her son, possibly mistaking her for a low-profile rich older woman. To this day, the abductor's identity and true motive remain a mystery. Ada Constance Kent was a wealthy woman who lived alone in a cottage in eastern England. She disappeared from her home in the summer of 1939 without telling anyone. After several months with no contact, her friends became worried. One friend searched her entire house but found no sign of her or any clue about where she might be. The police took over the investigation but also came up empty-handed. Inside the cottage, they only found a tray of leftover food and an open copy of Romeo and Juliet by the fireplace. 3 years later, another friend, George Winkle, revisited the abandoned cottage, hoping to find Ada or something everyone else had missed. But there was nothing new to be found. It wasn't until 1948, nearly 9 years later, that something unusual happened. Ada's bank account received a large, mysterious deposit. This prompted the police to search her home again. This time, what they found left them speechless. a fully clothed skeleton sitting up next to a bed, along with an empty bottle labeled poison. Authorities were completely baffled. Some believe the skeleton was Ada's, while others argue it was impossible since it appeared to be a male skeleton. If the skeleton was indeed Ada's, there's still no explanation for what happened to her after she left the cottage or the strange deposit in her bank account. Agent 355 was the code name given to a female spy during the American Revolution, believed to be part of the Culper Ring, a network of spies from that era. Her true identity remains unknown, but she is thought to be one of the first spies working for the United States. The number 355 could be decrypted using the Culper Ring's code system to mean lady. The only reference to Agent 355 comes from a letter Abraham Woodhull wrote to George Washington, where she was described as a reliable individual. The letter's structure suggests she was socially prominent and had contact with notable figures like Benedict Arnold. One theory suggests Agent 355 was Anna Strong, a neighbor of Abraham Woodhull. Anna allegedly helped locate trapped or lost patriots during failed raids on British shipments. However, other theories exist, and some enthusiasts believe the code was mistranslated. They argue that this woman might not have been part of the Culper spy ring and was simply a civilian who occasionally assisted the patriots. The mystery of Agent 355's true identity and role continues to intrigue historians. The Alphabet Murders were a series of child murders that happened between 1971 and 1973 in Rochester, New York. These murders involved 3 victims, all girls aged 10 or 11, whose first and last names started with the same letter. The victims were Carmen Colon, Wanda Wakowicz, and Michelle Manza. Each girl was essayed and strangled, with their bodies being discarded near small towns or villages around Rochester that also shared the same initial letter as their names. Carmen, 10 years old, disappeared around 4 p.m. on November 16, 1971, after running an errand for her grandmother. Witnesses at a pharmacy she visited saw her get into a car after being told her prescription wasn't ready. About an hour later, Carmen was seen naked and running down a street, screaming for help as a dark-colored pickup truck reversed to catch up to her. She was ultimately captured and taken back into the truck. A couple of days later, her body was found by 2 teenagers in a gully near Interstate 490, about 10 miles from where she was last seen. Carmen's autopsy revealed she had been essayed. Her skull and vertebrae were fractured, and she died from manual strangulation. Despite the public outcry and a significant police investigation, no suspects were apprehended. 18 months later, 11-year-old Wanda Wakowicz went missing on her way home after buying groceries. She was last seen around 5 p.m., and her mother called the police at 8 p.m. when she didn't return home. Despite a search involving 50 detectives, no clues were found. Wanda's body was discovered the next day at the base of a hill near State Route 104. She had also been essayed and strangled, with defensive wounds indicating she tried to fight off her attacker. Witnesses reported seeing Wanda talking to someone in a brown vehicle before her disappearance, but no clear description of the driver was obtained. In November of the same year, 11-year-old Michelle Manza disappeared. Her mother immediately contacted authorities when Michelle failed to come home after school. Michelle was last seen by friends leaving school around 3:30 p.m. A witness saw a beige or tan vehicle speeding with a crying girl in the passenger seat. 2 hours later, a motorist saw a dark-haired man with a young girl by the wrist near a truck with a flat tire on Route 350. The man acted suspiciously and scared off the motorist. Michelle's body was found 2 days later, fully clothed and showing the same signs of assault and strangulation as the previous victims. Several suspects were considered, including Carmen's uncle, Miguel, who had recently bought a vehicle matching witness descriptions. Miguel's car was found extensively cleaned, and he had hinted to a friend about fleeing the country due to something he had done in Rochester. Despite being extradited from Puerto Rico and failing to provide an alibi, Miguel was never conclusively linked to all 3 murders. He later took his own life in 1991 after a violent incident involving his wife and brother. Asha Degree was a 9-year-old girl from Shelby, North Carolina, who went missing on February 14, 2000. Early in the morning, despite heavy rain and wind, Asha packed her backpack and left her home for unknown reasons. Her parents discovered her absence later that morning. Asha's brother, O'Brien, who was 10 at the time, recalled hearing her bed squeak but thought she was just shifting positions. Between 4 and 4:30 a.m., several vehicles spotted a young girl walking along Highway 180. A trucker, worried for her safety, circled back a few times, causing Asha to bolt into a wooded area. Asha's mother, Akila, woke up around 6 a.m. and noticed Asha missing at 6:30 a.m. Initially thinking Asha might be at her grandmother's house, Akila discovered she was not and called the police. By 7 a.m., police arrived and searched the area with dogs but found nothing. Volunteers and family members spent the day searching, finding only a small mitten that Akila doubted was Asha's. The next day, some of Asha's belongings, including candy wrappers, a pencil, a marker, and a Mickey Mouse hairbow, were found near the wooded area. These items, however, did not lead to any breakthroughs. The search continued for a week before being called off. A convicted sex offender, Marcus Mellon, wrote to the FBI claiming to know Asha's whereabouts and what happened to her, stating she had been killed. The FBI interviewed Mellon, but his information did not lead to new findings. Over a year later, construction workers found Asha's backpack about 30 miles from where she was last seen. The backpack was double-bagged in black trash bags and buried under debris. It contained some of Asha's belongings and other items not known to be hers, including a t-shirt and a children's book. Partial fingerprints on the trash bags were not usable. Theories about Asha's disappearance include the possibility that she was being groomed and picked up by the groomer the morning she left. Her family was well regarded, and there were no signs of family issues that would have caused her to run away. The complete contents of her backpack have not been disclosed, but one construction worker, Terry Fleming, found them unsettling. Asha's case remains a mystery, with her family and investigators still seeking answers. The Atlas Vampire is the moniker given to an unknown murderer from Sweden in 1932. The victim was 32-year-old sex worker Lily Lindström, who was found dead in her tiny apartment in the Atlas area of Stockholm on May 4, 1932. Neighbors had reported a pungent odor coming from Lily's room, and when police broke in, they discovered she had been deceased for about 3 to 4 days. Lily was found without clothes and face down on her bed, having suffered blunt force trauma. Evidence indicated she had been essayed as a condom was found protruding from one of her orifices. Additionally, police discovered a ladle in the room and upon further inspection realized Lily had been completely drained of her blood. This led investigators to suspect that the culprit had either drunk or stored the blood, hence the name, the Atlas Vampire. Authorities questioned 9 known clients of Lily, but their names were never released, and none were charged with the murder. The last person to see Lily alive was her co-worker, Minnie Jansen, who told authorities that Lily had stopped by her apartment a few days before her death to get condoms. Minnie had no further information about Lily's activities prior to her murder. The case remains unsolved, and the true identity of the Atlas Vampire is still unknown. Richard Singer was a lawyer specializing in criminal defense and divorces. On July 9, 1937, Richard arrived home using a taxi. As the driver stepped out to open Richard's door, Richard waved him off, paid his fare, and let himself out. Gleefully walking to his front gate, Richard was suddenly blasted by an explosion, which sprayed jagged pieces of metal and debris at him. The force propelled Richard sideways, causing multiple injuries. The explosion also ripped a hole through the front door of the neighbor's home and blew off the taxi sign. Richard was rushed to the hospital and fortunately survived his injuries. When questioned by police and journalists about the incident, Richard declared it a deliberate attempt at murder, stating, "It could not have been anything else. I can conceive of no person who bears me a grudge and who would wish to do me an injury. I have not the slightest idea who is responsible for the attempt on my life. I am unable to supply the police with even the shadow of a clue." Investigators, left stumped after examining the bombing site the next day, found no sign of a tripwire and had previously discarded the idea of a timed bomb. Some proposed that the bomb had been thrown at Richard, but both Richard and the taxi driver insisted they had not seen anyone nearby. A couple of weeks later, Richard received an anonymous letter warning of another possible assassination attempt. He dismissed it as a practical joke and did not take it seriously. Over 80 years later, the mystery of who attempted to bomb Richard Singer remains unsolved. Interestingly enough, this topic seems to actually have been solved last year, or at the very least, half solved. In January 1953, a few workers came across the remains of two male children in Stanley Park, Vancouver, that were likely killed years earlier. Investigators estimated that the bodies had been there for at least 5 or 6 years. It was determined that the two boys died from head wounds inflicted by a hatchet, which was also found nearby. Initially, the investigation reached a standstill when medical examiners mistakenly identified one of the victims as female. After further testing, it was concluded that both victims were, in fact, male, and that they were brothers. In 2018, detectives used DNA databases such as 23andMe to investigate possible identities of the victims. By 2022, they concluded that the children were Derek and David Dalton, who were born in 1940 and 1941, respectively. However, this is where the solved portion of the case ends. The identity of the person who killed the boys and the motive behind the murder remain unknown. The Babushka Lady is an unidentified woman who was present at the site of John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963. She earned the nickname Babushka Lady due to the headscarf she wore, reminiscent of those worn by elderly Russian women. In numerous photos taken during the incident, she can be seen in the background. After the shooting, while others were taking cover, she remained standing in the open with a camera. Eventually, she was seen crossing the street and mingling with the fleeing crowd. Her identity remains unknown, and any film or photos she may have taken have never surfaced. In 1970, a woman named Beverly Oliver claimed to be the Babushka Lady. Beverly stated she filmed the assassination using a Super 8 Yashica camera. She recounted that after fleeing the scene, two men, identifying themselves as FBI agents, approached her and asked for her camera. She complied, expecting it to be returned within 10 days, but she never saw it again. This claim is questionable because the camera model Beverly mentioned was not available until 1969, 6 years after the assassination. Beverly suggested she had an experimental camera and was unsure if it bore the manufacturer's name. Like many entries in this iceberg, theories abound. Some speculate the Babushka Lady was a spy or even an assassin, with some theories proposing her camera was a weapon or a signaling device. Others believe she was just an ordinary bystander. In 1991, a woman was discovered hanged in a motel shower, and by 2021, she was referred to as Becca. Her death was ruled as suicide, but despite having a photograph linked to her, her identity remains unknown. On June 3, 1991, around 10 p.m., a truck driver named Eduardo Colon checked into a motel in Albuquerque, New Mexico, renting a room for 2 people for one night, with checkout required by 11 a.m. the next day. When Eduardo didn't check out, staff only noticed his absence on June 5th. A security guard was sent to Eduardo's room and found the door locked from the inside, requiring a screwdriver to enter. Initially, nothing seemed amiss, but the guard was horrified to find a woman hanged from the showerhead in the bathroom. Authorities found heroin in the woman's system and, based on the decomposition, believed she had died the same night. A photograph of the woman with a man, identified by motel staff as Eduardo, was found on the desk in the room. It took several years to locate Eduardo's family, only to learn he had died of natural causes. When shown the photograph, Eduardo's family claimed the man was not Eduardo, and that they didn't know the woman. Theorists suggest the family might have lied to protect Eduardo's image. Police also found a scale labeled George Martinez, presumably used to weigh drugs. Assuming the family was truthful and the man in the photograph wasn't Eduardo, the identities of both the man and the woman remain a mystery. Although the death was ruled a suicide, some internet sleuths argue the showerhead couldn't support over 100 pounds and was too short for an effective hanging. They propose that the woman, possibly overdosed on heroin, was propped up in the shower to mimic a side. Belle Gunness, also known as Hell's Bell, was a Norwegian-American serial killer active between 1884 and 1908 across several states, including Illinois and Indiana. Confirmed to have killed at least 14 people, some sources suggest her victim count could be as high as 40. Most of her victims were men she lured in with promises of marriage. Interestingly, Bell supposedly died in a fire in 1908, but many believe she faked her own death, as her body was never conclusively identified, leaving her true fate unknown. Bell was described as having a robust build, almost resembling a man, standing about 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighing between 220 and 250 pounds. In Chicago, Bell worked as a butcher, handling and cutting animal carcasses until her first marriage in 1884 to Mads Sorensen. The couple had insurance policies for their home and small candy store, both of which eventually burned down. They also had children who died from inflammation of the large intestine, which many believe was due to poisoning. Suspiciously, both children were insured, and Bell collected substantial insurance payouts after their deaths. Mads also had 2 life insurance policies that overlapped for a brief period. On July 30th, 1900, the day one policy was set to expire and the other began, Mads died of a cerebral hemorrhage. Bell collected the payouts from both policies. She then moved to Indiana and bought a pig farm, where she married Peter Gunnis in 1902. They had a daughter who died in infancy, and 8 months later, Peter died from a head injury. Peter had an insurance policy that paid out $3,000. Bell claimed Peter accidentally knocked over a meat grinder, but the coroner suspected murder, although there was no evidence to arrest her. In 1908, authorities began to uncover Bell's crimes. In April of that year, her Indiana farmhouse burned down. A headless female corpse was found in the wreckage and initially identified as Bell, but many now believe it was one of her victims. Further investigation of the farm revealed numerous body parts buried in the yard. After 2 days of digging, remains of 11 people were found, leading authorities to retract their initial statement that the body was Bell's. Most of the exhumed bodies were unidentifiable, as Bell had dismembered them, cutting off arms and legs at the elbows and knees, and sometimes decapitating them, placing their heads in their groin areas. Despite being officially pronounced dead, evidence suggests Bell may have survived. The body believed to be Bell was found to be much younger, and it was determined that the body had been burned post-mortem. These factors contribute to the belief that Bell faked her death and escaped. Beowulf is an exceptionally long tale, often regarded as one of the most significant works in Old English literature. The manuscript is in a very delicate state, making preservation challenging. For those unfamiliar with the story, here's a brief summary. It follows a young warrior who travels to assist the king of the Danes, whose kingdom is under attack by a monster named Grendel. Beowulf manages to kill Grendel and subsequently defeats Grendel's mother. Peace lasts for 50 years until a dragon appears. Beowulf, tasked with killing the dragon, sets out and succeeds but dies in the process. The manuscript suffered damage in a fire in 1731 while housed in Ashburnham House. Parts of the poem, including an excerpt detailing the climactic battle between Beowulf and the dragon, were lost in the fire. Despite these losses, the story remains comprehensible. It is believed that Beowulf was initially passed down orally before being written down, leading to the possibility that parts of the story were lost or altered over time. The missing segments of the tale are among the greatest mysteries of English literature. Bermeja is a phantom island allegedly situated near the northern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. Mapped by prominent Spanish cartographers in the 16th century, it has been the subject of numerous studies and surveys from 1997 to 2009, none of which found the island. In the 1970s, Bermeja even served as a reference point for Mexico's 200 nautical mile economic zone. However, in 1997, a naval fishing crew searching for the island was unable to locate it. Despite multiple expeditions and investigations, the island appeared to have vanished. Some believe Bermeja never existed, suggesting the early cartographers either made an error in their maps or placed the island incorrectly. Another theory proposes that the island was submerged by rising sea levels over the centuries. A more outlandish idea speculates that the CIA destroyed the island to gain an economic advantage in the region. Bigfoot, often called Sasquatch, is portrayed as a large, ape-like, hairy creature found in North America. Accounts and folklore about Bigfoot date back to the 6th century, with Native American carvings purportedly showing a group of these beings. Various tribes in Canada and the United States have their own narratives about Bigfoot, with the term Sasquatch originating from the Halkomelem language. The term Bigfoot was coined in the 1950s after the discovery of large, human-like footprints at a logging site believed to belong to this elusive creature. Bigfoot is among the most famous and often mentioned cryptids globally, supported by numerous eyewitness accounts, supposed videos and photos, and alleged forensic traces. Sightings often describe Bigfoot engaging in behaviors such as throwing heavy objects to make noise and hollering. Wooden nests and structures are also attributed to them. Theories about Bigfoot's true nature vary. Some suggest they could be surviving Gigantopithecus, a giant ape species from Southeast Asia believed to reach up to 10 feet in height. However, Gigantopithecus was not bipedal and lived solely in Southeast Asia, differing from Bigfoot reports. Other theories propose Bigfoot might be a Neanderthal or an undiscovered species of ape. The Butcher of Mons is the name given to an unidentified serial killer responsible for 5 murders during 1996 and 1997 in Mons, Belgium. On March 22, 1997, a police officer named Oliver M.Z. was on his daily patrol on horseback in Mons when he discovered a pile of 8 garbage bags. Initially thinking they contained trash, he got off his horse to inspect them and found they were filled with human body parts. Investigators determined the limbs belonged to 3 different women. On March 23rd and 24th, 2 more bags were found on the same street, one containing a woman's torso. On April 12th, another 2 bags were discovered, containing a foot, a leg, and a head. The systematic mutilation of the bodies made identification difficult, but authorities eventually identified the victims as Carolina Russo, Martin Bond, Jacqueline Leclerc, Natalie Godard, and Bonia Valencia. The body parts left behind did not provide clues to the killer's identity. One suspect was Smil Tolja, who had killed someone in Albania and disposed of the body in garbage bags. He was also caught in Brooklyn, New York, disposing of bags containing the remains of a woman named Mary Beale. Another theory suggests the victims were from a mental health institution, killed by either a resident or an employee. Investigators found that all the victims had been committed to the same institution, but briefly considered this possibility before abandoning it. The investigation team seemed disinterested in the case and did not pursue this lead. True Cannibal Holocaust is an Italian found footage horror film from 1980, infamous for its controversial content. Despite its graphic scenes involving animal cruelty, racism, and cannibalism, the film has a dedicated cult following. The plot revolves around a rescue mission in the Amazon rainforest, where a crew of filmmakers has gone missing. The rescue team finds the filmmakers' footage, and TV stations plan to air it as a sensational special. The film's realistic shooting style led many to believe the scenes were genuine. Film historians continue to differentiate fact from fiction in this film. Callum Waddle, one such historian, mentioned an unfinished torture scene involving a person being slowly lowered into a piranha-infested river. Only one image of this scene has surfaced. The realistic portrayal led people to believe a man was genuinely subjected to this torture. In reality, a local man who had already lost his leg was tied to a wooden log with piranha props attached to his leg. The full contents and whereabouts of this scene remain unknown. In January 2020, a Reddit user named Tansa asked about the identity of a supposed celebrity on their curtain in the r/tip-of-my-tongue subreddit. The online community offered various guesses and theories, but everyone agreed on one thing: the celebrity was a woman. Despite modern technology, the internet couldn't identify the mystery woman. The original poster, OP, later revealed that the curtain, purchased around 2008 in Finland, featured easily recognizable models and actors, including Jessica Alba, Josh Holloway, Adriana Lima, and others. However, in November 2021, another Reddit user suggested that the mysterious figure might be Brad Pitt. This revelation shocked many, as the silhouette had been assumed to be a woman. The next challenge was to find the original photograph of Brad Pitt that the curtain might have used. Initially, the search was unsuccessful, but eventually a Reddit post surfaced with a photo taken in 1994 for GQ magazine. Comparing the curtain image with the GQ photo revealed striking similarities. Some pointed out that Brad had stubble in the original photo while the curtain figure was clean-shaven. However, it seemed that other men on the curtain had their facial hair removed as well, such as Josh Holloway. For nearly 20 years, Charles Peck worked as a customer service agent for Delta Airlines at the Salt Lake City International Airport. In September 2008, seeking a change, he decided to move in with his fiancée Andrea, who lived in California. Charles purchased a plane ticket to Los Angeles, and upon arrival, boarded the Metrolink to meet Andrea, who planned to pick him up. The train was scheduled to arrive at Andrea's location around 4:45 p.m. Unfortunately, the journey ended in tragedy. The train's engineer, distracted by texting, missed a stop signal, causing the Metrolink to collide with a freight train traveling at high speed in the opposite direction. Andrea, upon hearing about the accident, rushed to the scene, hoping to find Charles alive. She noticed several missed calls from Charles on her phone. Friends and family also reported receiving calls from Charles, totaling over 35. Strangely, the calls contained only static and no voice. Initially, it was believed that Charles was trying to reach out for help but was too injured to speak. These calls continued until 3 a.m. the next morning. When firefighters finally discovered Charles, he had sadly not survived. Medics determined he likely died on impact, making it improbable for him to have made the calls, which spanned 10 to 11 hours. The mysterious calls sparked various theories. Some believed it was a paranormal event, suggesting Charles might have been a crisis apparition, where a dying individual reaches out to loved ones one last time. Others speculated that a disturbed individual might have found Charles's phone and made the calls. Another theory was a malfunction in the phone, though this explanation seemed unlikely given that only those closest to Charles were contacted. To add to the mystery, Charles's phone was never found. The Chicago Tylenol murders involved a series of fatal poisonings due to drug tampering in 1982. A total of 7 people lost their lives after consuming Tylenol capsules that had been tainted with potassium cyanide. The tragedy began on September 29th when 12-year-old Mary Kellerman died after taking an extra-strength Tylenol capsule. Adam Janis also passed away the same day in a hospital after taking Tylenol. Tragically, Adam's brother Stanley and sister-in-law Teresa died shortly after, having taken capsules from the same bottle. Within a week, Mary McFarlane, Paula Prince, and Mary Reiner also succumbed in similar circumstances. Once authorities connected the deaths to Tylenol, urgent warnings were broadcasted through various media, advising people to stop using Tylenol products immediately. Investigations revealed that the tampered capsules originated from manufacturing centers in Pennsylvania and Texas, suggesting the tampering might have occurred either in store or after distribution. Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer, ceased all production and advertising of Tylenol and initiated a nationwide recall. No one has been formally charged with the murders, but James William Lewis emerged as a significant suspect. Lewis sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the attacks. He was arrested, tried for extortion, and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Despite his conviction for extortion, there remains doubt about his involvement in the poisonings due to a lack of concrete evidence. Lewis denied any responsibility for the Tylenol deaths, leading many to believe he was merely exploiting the situation. Christine Shields Wagner, a woman who went missing on October 10, 2016, was 67 years old at the time of her disappearance. Christine was last seen leaving her Olympia, Washington home in her 2004 Toyota Matrix. When police investigated her home, they found her purse left behind and discovered her phone was turned off. A couple of weeks later, her car was found at Harmony Farm Conservation in Olympia. Christine had a history of self-harm due to her poor mental health and had previously attempted to take her own life. Because of her mental health struggles, her case is classified as endangered missing. and many investigators fear she may no longer be alive. The Cleveland torso murderer was an unidentified serial killer active in Cleveland, Ohio, during the 1930s. This killer is known for dismembering and decapitating at least 12 victims, although recent research suggests there could have been as many as 20. The murders began on September 23, 1935, when two teenage boys found the decapitated and emasculated body of an unknown man at the base of Jackass Hill. This first victim, identified as 28-year-old Edward Andry, had been completely drained of blood and left naked with rope burns on his wrists. While investigating, police discovered a second, similarly decapitated and emasculated body in the vicinity. This second victim, estimated to be in his 40s, was never identified. Interestingly, a chemical preservative was found on the second body, causing the skin to turn red and leathery. This same preservative was also found on another victim, known as the Lady of the Lake, who was discovered in the same location as the seventh victim tied to the torso murders. Although the Lady of the Lake has never been officially linked to the Cleveland torso murders, the similarities in the preservative and location often bring the cases together in discussions. Most victims of the torso murderer remain unidentified, as many were drifters with few reliable connections or documentation. The dismemberment of the bodies further complicated identification, as not all heads or fingerprints could be retrieved. Throughout the investigation, around 9,000 people were interrogated, and nearly 1,000 other crimes were solved along the way. Despite the extensive efforts, the case remains unresolved. However, many investigators believe Dr. Frank Sweeney is the most likely suspect. Dr. Sweeney, a World War I veteran who served in a unit responsible for amputations, struggled with alcoholism, anxiety, and depression after the war. He had sustained severe nerve damage from being gassed during his military service. Investigator Elliot Ness interviewed Sweeney and considered him a viable suspect, although the evidence was circumstantial. Ness faced significant challenges in pursuing Sweeney, partly because Sweeney's cousin was one of Ness's political opponents and publicly criticized the handling of the murders. Eventually, Sweeney committed himself to a hospital, and the murders stopped. From the hospital, Sweeney harassed Ness and his family with postcards until his death in July 1964. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, Sweeney's surgical expertise and access to ideal facilities make him a strong suspect in the case. The Connecticut River Valley Killer is the name given to an unidentified serial killer who was active primarily in the 1980s, taking the lives of at least 7 people. As the name suggests, the killer mainly operated in the New England region of the United States. In the mid-1980s, 3 women disappeared in Claremont, New Hampshire. The remains of 2 of these women were found within 1,000 feet of each other, but due to the condition of the remains, it was difficult to determine the exact cause of death. However, evidence suggested they had been stabbed, with the fatal wounds mainly around the head and neck area. About 10 days later, a third body was found, also showing multiple stab wounds. Around the same time, another woman in her mid-30s was stabbed to death in her home in Vermont. Authorities began to suspect these murders were connected, prompting them to review past homicides in the area. They found 2 similar cases from 1978 and 1981, reinforcing the idea of a serial killer. The killings shared similar methods of operation, including the locations where the bodies were dumped and the patterns of the wounds. One notable victim is 22-year-old Jane Borowski. On August 6, 1988, a pregnant Jane was returning home from a convenience store when she noticed a man approaching her car. Despite her attempts to avoid him, he reached her driver's side window, tapped on it, and accused her of beating up his girlfriend before stabbing her 27 times. Miraculously, Jane survived and managed to drive to a friend's house where she was taken to a hospital. She and her baby survived, and Jane provided police with details for a composite sketch of the attacker. Many suspects have been considered over the years. One of them, Gary Westover, confessed to one of the murders shortly before his death in 1997. Gary, who was paraplegic, claimed he and 3 friends abducted, killed, and disposed of Barbara Agnew, supposedly the Connecticut River Valley Killer's final victim. Despite this confession, authorities did not seem particularly interested, and Gary died in 1998 without further investigation into his friends. Another suspect, Michael Nicolau, had a troubled past, including service as a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, where he was discharged for flying too low and causing the death of civilians. Michael's violent tendencies were well documented, and his personal life was turbulent. His first wife, Michelle, reported fearing for her life before she disappeared in December 1988. Michael later remarried Eileen, and both she and her daughter were found murdered along with Michael, further complicating his potential involvement in the Connecticut River Valley killings. The Great Library of Alexandria, located in Egypt, was one of the most significant libraries of the ancient world. It was estimated to have housed over 500,000 documents from various nations, including Greece, India, Persia, and Egypt. These documents covered a wide range of subjects such as law, comedy, poetry, history, medicine, math, science, and more. The library was part of the Alexandrian Museum, one of the largest institutions of higher learning, and was frequently visited by prominent scholars. Early records suggest the library was founded during the reign of Ptolemy I and organized by Demetrius, a student of Aristotle who had been exiled from Athens. However, these accounts are somewhat questionable, as some details have been proven inaccurate. When Julius Caesar pursued Pompey, he was blocked by Egyptian ships in the Alexandria harbor. In a fit of rage, Caesar ordered the burning of the fleet and sacking of the city. The flames spread from the harbor to the city, eventually reaching the library. Although the library wasn't completely destroyed at this time and was somewhat salvaged, it suffered additional burnings and attacks over the years, ultimately leading to its complete destruction and the loss of most of its contents. There are often claims that the library contained all the world's knowledge, which is an exaggeration. However, the destruction of the library was undeniably a significant setback for human progress, potentially setting back advancements by generations. Unfortunately, we have little explicit information about the exact contents of the library's documents. Corpse quakes. Throughout history, numerous gravediggers have reported instances of corpse quakes. If you're unfamiliar with this term, it refers to individuals suddenly experiencing violent shaking while in a graveyard. One gravedigger who worked at Cypress Hill Cemetery for 15 years claimed to have witnessed this phenomenon multiple times. In one instance, while working with 3 other diggers, one of them, previously energetic and outgoing, suddenly became withdrawn. They were preparing a grave for a same-day funeral when, as soon as a young man thrust his spade into the ground, his body began to shake uncontrollably. Even after setting his tools aside, the tremors in his arms and body persisted. A few days later, his co-workers also started experiencing similar corpse quakes, ultimately forcing them to stop working. Interestingly, when these employees left their jobs entirely, the shaking ceased. On July 4th, 1999, a family visiting the San Miguel and Dolores rivers in western Colorado made a grim discovery while swimming. They found a white 1994 Ford F-250 pickup truck submerged in muddy waters. When the police arrived, they were eager to investigate, as this truck might have been a lid in an ongoing case. Authorities identified the truck as belonging to Dale Williams, a man who had gone missing 1 to 2 months earlier. Unfortunately, there were no clues about Dale's whereabouts in the vehicle. Dale was 42 years old at the time of his disappearance, and was described as an active community leader, loyal husband, and loving father. He owned an auto body shop and several other businesses and buildings in neighboring towns. Dale failed to return home on May 27, 1999. Initially, his wife Diana thought he was swamped with extra work at his body shop. As the night went on, Diana grew increasingly concerned, calling her husband and the body shop multiple times without an answer. Unable to sleep, she frequently checked the driveway but never saw Dale's vehicle. The next morning, Diana was horrified to find that Dale was still missing. She visited the body shop immediately after dropping off her daughters at school, noticing that the door was left unlocked. Investigating the business, Diana called Dale's mother to see if he had visited her after work. Dale's mother had not heard from him, and neither she nor Diana had contacted the police at this point. They decided to investigate on their own visiting multiple locations that Dale frequented but finding no trace of him. By the end of the day, having exhausted all their ideas, they finally contacted the police. Authorities found out that Dale had stopped by the home of a customer named Tammy. Tammy mentioned that Dale visited her in person to update her on her vehicle, which she found strange. Dale told Tammy he was in a rush to help a stranded motorist before leaving. This detail confused Diana, as the shop didn't own a tow truck and didn't handle internal repairs on vehicles. Dale's family plastered missing posters all over the community, and everyone seemed eager to help find him, except for one person. Only 2 days after putting up the missing posters, Diana noticed that someone had taken them down. Initially, she didn't think much of it and simply put up more posters, but they were removed again a few days later. After learning about this, the police set up a camera and captured images of a man tearing down the posters. He was identified as a longtime family friend of Dale and Diana. During questioning, the police learned that this family friend was angry at Dale for moving his ex-wife to another state without his knowledge, after Dale had shared some information about their abusive relationship. Understandably, Diana believed this man to be responsible for Dale's disappearance. It was revealed that after helping this man's ex-wife, Dale found strange items outside his body shop, such as torn-up pictures stolen from within the shop, bullets, and a revolver in the drop box at a video rental shop Diana ran. The man denied leaving these items around the family's businesses. Through various signs, such as the ignition being turned on and the angle at which the truck landed in the water, it was determined that the truck was deliberately steered off-road. Police stated that it would have been virtually impossible for anyone to accidentally crash into the water. Oddly, the metal toolbox bolted in the back of the truck was missing. Dive teams searched the surrounding rivers but found no signs of Dale. The mystery remains unsolved. Darwin Scott is a name that many people may not recognize, but a name that is likely much more familiar to everyone is Charles Manson, the infamous leader of the Manson family cult. For those unfamiliar, the Manson family worshipped Charles Manson as a manifestation of Jesus Christ and followed his commands. Charles Manson was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of 7 people. According to a Los Angeles DA, Charles felt a calling after interpreting some Beatles lyrics, specifically Helter Skelter, as describing a future race war that would end the world. Back to the topic at hand, Darwin Scott was Charles Manson's uncle. On May 27, 1969, Darwin Scott was found dead and pinned to the floor with a butcher's knife in his home in Ashland, Kentucky. He had been stabbed and hacked about 19 times. The identity of Darwin's killer or killers remains unknown. Many investigators in Ashland believe the perpetrators were from the Manson family and that Charles Manson himself ordered the killing of his uncle. There are also rumors suggesting that Charles Manson personally killed Darwin, but he reportedly had a solid alibi for his whereabouts at the time of Darwin's death. Darwin Scott was known for his criminal activities, having been arrested and convicted of various crimes dating back to 1933. He was also an avid gambler who was rumored to flee town whenever his debts became too large. Therefore, it's also possible that Darwin was killed by a personal enemy and not someone from the Manson family. David Chase. On October 15, 1995, a private investigator named Phil Harris reported hearing a disembodied voice while sleeping in his chair. The voice claimed to be David Chase and said he had been murdered, urging Phil to investigate his death and buy the Sunday paper. Phil initially thought it was a bizarre dream, but his research revealed that a man named David Chase had drowned about 4 months before Phil heard the voice. David's wife, Judy, also believed that her husband had been murdered. Phil felt he had been chosen to solve David's case. When he approached Judy, she initially refused his help. However, after Phil provided details that only David and Judy would know, she agreed to let him investigate. Phil took on the case for the symbolic fee of $1. David and Judy had lived in Evergreen, Colorado, for a year and a half and were planning to adopt 2 foster children. On June 6, 1995, David was scheduled to work on a roofing job with a man named Matt Orosk. After finishing their work around noon, the two went out for lunch, and David cashed an $1,800 check at the bank. They decided to visit a local bar afterward. When David failed to return home that night, Judy became anxious but tried to reassure herself. By the next morning, she knew something was wrong. She immediately drove to Matt's house to inquire about David. Matt told her that he had left the bar before David and last saw him playing pool. Later, Matt's girlfriend told Judy that David had said he was going for a swim with a raft. Judy found this hard to believe, as David, an experienced mountain climber, knew better than to swim in snow-fed rivers. Judy did not trust Matt and went to the police. Matt repeated his story of David going for a swim. 6 weeks later, David's body was found in Bear Creek River, about 3 miles downstream from where he was last seen. The autopsy reported drowning as the cause of death, but also noted a broken neck, strange cuts on his legs, and his clothes ripped from his body. When questioned again, Matt changed his story, now claiming that David fell into the river while they were disposing of some brush. Judy wondered why Matt didn't seek help from the nearby fire station if it was an accident. Phil continued his investigation and claimed that David's ghost frequently communicated with him. According to Phil, David said that Matt had pressured him to cash the $1,800 check to buy Matt's truck. When David reconsidered the purchase, Matt became furious and a physical altercation ensued, leading to David being struck with a blunt object and falling into the river. On June 7, 1996, Phil took Judy to a local reservoir, claiming that the murder weapon and David's bloody clothes were dumped there. Tragically, Phil died of a heart attack a week later, leaving the case unresolved. Judy continued to investigate on her own, but there was insufficient evidence to charge Matt, and the police reached a standstill. The case remains unsolved, shrouded in mystery and strange circumstances, with many aspects difficult to believe. David Fortin. On February 10, 2009, in Quebec, 14-year-old David Fortin went missing on his way to school around 7 to 8 a.m. That morning, David asked his mother, Caroline, for a ride to school. Caroline, being busy, told David that she couldn't drive him. David didn't press the issue. He simply put on his jacket, grabbed his backpack, and left for school. After that, David was never seen again. The circumstances of David's disappearance remain unclear, with theories ranging from abduction to him running away. David's parents believe the latter scenario, given his history of relentless bullying. From a young age, David was tormented by his classmates. To illustrate the severity, when David was around 6 years old, his grade school teachers would let him out early so he could run home before other kids could catch him. In 2008, David was chased by a group of about 20 people who cornered him, stole his bike, and beat him. David managed to escape by crossing a deep creek and sought refuge at his cousin Maxim's house, where he called the police. However, the police's advice to ignore and leave the gang alone only deepened David's despair, leading him to see a psychiatrist, although it didn't help much. David's family grew increasingly worried, especially since he often left the house for long walks after dinner, likely to reflect on his life. Surprisingly, when David turned 14, the bullying subsided somewhat after he fought back at school, knocking out a boy. This respite, however, was short-lived. On January 28, 2009, David's mother panicked when he didn't return from school. Maxim, David's cousin, searched for him and eventually found him walking along a long road leading to a river. David, shivering from the cold, was taken to a nearby McDonald's by Maxim. There, David confided that he couldn't take the bullying anymore. For the next few days, David's mother kept him home from school, and his mood seemed to improve slightly. However, David's dark thoughts returned. It was suggested that David might have run away to avoid a severe beating after he reported a student playing with a fire extinguisher to a teacher. This student had threatened to smash David's face in. On the day he disappeared, David crawled into his mother's bed and hugged her tightly before asking for a ride to school. This detail led many investigators to believe that David either took his own life or ran away, and the hug was his way of saying goodbye to his mother. To this day, the fate of David Fortin remains unknown. Despite the many years since his disappearance, his mother holds out hope that her son will be found alive. Diane Suzuki, a 19-year-old student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, vanished on July 6, 1985. Diane was just under 5 feet tall and weighed around 110 pounds. She was last seen between 3 and 5 p.m. near the Rosalie Woodson Dance Academy, where she worked as a dance instructor. At the time of Diane's disappearance, a series of unsolved murders were occurring in Oahu, resulting in the deaths of 9 women. Many investigators speculated that Diane might have been a victim of the same killer. After Diane finished teaching her class on July 6th, she was supposed to meet friends who were waiting for her in the parking lot. Her friends quickly realized something was wrong, as Diane was known for her punctuality and would have informed them if her plans changed. They discovered her car abandoned in the parking lot, with her purse and keys inside the dance academy. Diane was officially reported missing that night when her friends contacted the authorities. Diane's parents were immediately notified and arrived at the dance facility. Upon their arrival, they noticed something suspicious. 3 nervous-looking individuals hurriedly carrying a large trunk out of the building. Authorities identified the trio as Dway Hamasaki and his parents. The Doodler is an unidentified serial killer believed to have murdered between 6 and 16 men in San Francisco, California, between 1974 and 1975. Additionally, 3 men survived attacks by the Doodler. The nickname was derived from the killer's habit of sketching his victims before murdering them. The Doodler frequented restaurants, bars, and gay nightclubs, targeting white males who were ultimately stabbed to death. Descriptions of the killer depict him as an African-American man, aged 19 to 25, around 6 feet tall. The first known victim, Gerald Kavanaugh, was 49 years old. His fully clothed body, showing multiple self-defense wounds, was found lying face-up on Ocean Beach in San Francisco. Gerald was a single man living alone, which was a common trait among most victims, though 1 or 2 had families nearby. It's unclear if the killer specifically targeted individuals with this characteristic. In 1977, a police officer identified a suspect believed to be the Doodler. The 3 survivors, however, refused to testify against the suspect, fearing they would out themselves and jeopardize their careers. 1 survivor was a well-known entertainer, and another was a diplomat. Due to the stigma surrounding homosexuality at the time, they chose not to step into court. Although authorities were confident in the suspect's guilt, the lack of hard evidence and unwillingness of the survivors to testify led to his release. To this day, the suspect's identity and details about the crimes remain undisclosed, with only brief write-ups describing the victim's age and height available to the public. Most of you are probably familiar with Stonehenge, arguably the world's most famous prehistoric monument, located in England. While we still don't know who built it, it's estimated to be about 5,000 years old. However, today we're not discussing that ancient site, but rather a somewhat lesser-known monument in Georgia, often referred to as Doomsday Stonehenge, or the Georgia Guidestones. The Georgia Guidestones were erected in 1979, and they feature inscriptions in 8 modern languages and 4 ancient ones. The purpose and interpretation of these stones are subjects of much debate. Carved into the stones are 10 guidelines, including maintaining humanity under 500 million in balance with nature, guiding reproduction wisely, uniting humanity with a new living language, ruling with tempered reason, protecting people and nations with fair laws, resolving international disputes in a world court, avoiding petty laws and useless officials, balancing personal rights with social duties, prizing truth, beauty, love, and seeking harmony with the infinite, and finally, not being a cancer on the earth, leaving room for nature. There is reportedly 1 person who knows the identity of the stone's creator, but he has vowed to never reveal it, even under threat of death. Theories about the stone's purpose range widely. Some believe they were meant to outline a new world order or totalitarian regime, while others think they have satanic origins. Given that the original Stonehenge is thought to have astronomical significance, many speculate that the Georgia Guidestones might serve a similar purpose. However, astronomers who studied the site described its astronomical features as primitive, comparing it to an abacus against Stonehenge's computer. Unfortunately, last year the Georgia Guidestones were destroyed. Initially damaged by a blast, they were subsequently demolished for safety reasons, leaving their true purpose shrouded in mystery. Most of you probably remember the popular Nickelodeon show Drake and Josh, which premiered in January 2004. While the aired first episode, known as the pilot, is familiar to many, there's also a mysterious unaired version. This unaired pilot was reportedly produced around 2002, before Nickelodeon officially picked up the show. The plot of this version is similar, but with some notable differences, including Josh's dad being played by a different actor, the late Stephen Furst, who was later replaced due to availability issues. One notable scene in the unaired pilot involves a basketball incident. In this version, Drake accidentally hits Walter in the face with a basketball, knocking him out. In the aired version, however, Walter catches the ball, spins it on his finger, and then tosses it, accidentally breaking a ceramic lamp. Discussions about this lost episode began around 2009 when Dan Schneider, the show's creator, uploaded a short clip featuring Stephen Furst as Josh's dad. For a long time, this snippet was the only glimpse we had of the episode. In 2022, Schneider released a compilation video with additional clips from the lost episode, speculated to be a 20th anniversary celebration of the pilot's creation. However, this compilation video has since been made private. On July 20th, 1968, a fishing boat named El Fausto left the port of Tazacorte, heading towards El Hierro Island. The boat was owned by Rafael Acosta, and the crew consisted of brothers Ramon and Alberto Hernandez, along with their cousin Miguel Acosta. All were experienced sailors and fishermen. Despite being a fishing vessel, El Fausto was larger than usual and often used to transport goods, such as fruit and, in this case, explosives for agricultural purposes. Another crew member, Venero Acosta, missed this trip due to a prior engagement. After a 7-hour journey, the crew reached La Frontera on the northern side of El Hierro. As they unloaded their cargo, they met a man named Julio Garcia. Julio received word that his 2-month-old daughter was severely ill and urgently wanted to return home, but had missed the last boat. Desperate, he asked to join the crew back to La Palma, offering to pay. The crew, understanding his plight, agreed to take him without charge. After completing their tasks, they set off for La Palma at around 2:30 a.m. on July 21st. The seas were calm and the weather uneventful, although some fishermen reported a mist forming later that night. Rafael expected the crew to arrive at Tazacorte around 10 a.m., but when they didn't show up, he grew worried. He sent out another group of sailors along the same route, hoping to find El Fausto. They reported back that they saw no sign of the missing boat. Rafael issued an emergency alert to all nearby ships and aircraft. Despite favorable conditions, El Fausto was not found, leaving Rafael and the families of the crew deeply concerned. On July 25th, Rafael received promising news. The crew of the ship Ducasa had spotted El Fausto in the Atlantic Ocean while traveling from South America to the Netherlands. The crew reportedly refused a tow but accepted food, fuel, and cigarettes before parting ways. This interaction sparked speculation, with some doubting the full account of the Ducasa crew. On October 9th, the Italian ship Anna Di Maio reported finding El Fausto again. Crew member Antonio Asion boarded the vessel and found a partly mummified body clutching a transistor radio in the engine room, believed to be Julio. There were no signs of the other men or any violence or damage. The Anna Di Maio crew attempted to tow El Fausto to Venezuela, but the cable snapped, causing El Fausto to sink. This story, like many involving missing ships, remains eerie and mysterious. Some theories, though speculative, suggest El Fausto may have been involved in illegal activities. This entry, like a few others on this iceberg, appears to be a solved mystery. However, its obscurity and brevity make it worth discussing. The Eltanen antenna is an object that was photographed in 1964 on the seafloor near the Antarctic research ship USNS Eltanen. The object was found approximately 13,000 feet deep, and its strange antenna-like structure puzzled many. Most scientists initially believed the structure to be a type of carnivorous sponge, while some theorists speculated it could be an extraterrestrial artifact. However, in 2003, the object was officially identified as a species of carnivorous sponge. Its scientific name is challenging to pronounce, but its true nature has been confirmed. This entry refers to the peculiar phenomenon of animals, most commonly frogs or toads, reportedly found alive after being encased in solid materials like rock or wood. Scientists have largely dismissed this phenomenon since the 19th century. However, in the early 1800s, experiments were conducted to investigate these claims. An English geologist named William Buckland conducted such experiments by placing toads of various sizes into carved-out chambers inside limestone, sealing the rocks, and then burying them. After a year, he exhumed the stones and found that most of the toads had died. However, a few had survived, and Buckland noticed small cracks in the stones housing the surviving toads, which he speculated allowed insects to enter, providing sustenance. Buckland then resealed the rocks with the surviving toads and buried them again. After another year, he unearthed the stones and discovered that all the toads had perished. He concluded that any accounts of animals found alive while entombed were likely mistaken. In modern times, most scientists consider such stories to be hoaxes. Flight 19 was a group of 5 torpedo bombers that vanished over the Bermuda Triangle in December 1945, sparking much of the supernatural speculation associated with the region. The incident resulted in the loss of 14 airmen and 13 crew members from a search and rescue mission. Initially, Navy investigators concluded that flight leader Lieutenant Charles Taylor had become disoriented after the compasses failed, leading the flight off course. However, this report was later revised to attribute the loss to unknown causes, avoiding placing blame on Taylor. On the day Flight 19 disappeared, the group was conducting a routine navigation and combat training exercise. Their route included a bombing practice at a location called Chicken Rocks. After passing this point, the flight began experiencing compass malfunctions, leading to confusion about their position. As they flew aimlessly, the Naval Air Station made contact with Lieutenant Taylor, who was instructed to switch to the search and rescue frequency, but refused. Taylor directed his crew to head east for 10 minutes, despite some crew members suggesting that heading west would lead them back home. Following Taylor's orders, they flew east as the weather worsened and radio contact eventually ceased. Taylor's final message stated, "All planes close up tight. We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." In 1986, wreckage from an Avenger was found off the Florida coast during the search for the Challenger space shuttle debris. Initially thought to be from Flight 19, this was later proven incorrect. Over the years, other wreckages were discovered and mistakenly identified as Flight 19, but none were confirmed. To this day, the fate of Flight 19 remains a mystery. Frankfurt Jane Doe refers to an unidentified woman whose skull was discovered wrapped in aluminum foil in Germany in 2004. The circumstances of her death remain unknown, but the primary suspect is Manfred Seal, a suspected serial killer believed to have murdered between 5 and 9 women. Manfred Seal passed away in August 2014 at the age of 67, never having been arrested. He is also suspected in several other unsolved cases, including those of Julia Schroeder and Christine Goldhagen. Frankfurt Jane Doe was estimated to be around 40 to 50 years old. Only her skull has been found. No other parts of her remains have surfaced. Several teeth were missing, and the skull showed signs of a healed nasal fracture, suggesting she had a crooked nose. Additionally, it is suspected she may have had a lisp. Beyond these details, little is known about her identity or life. Geff, the talking mongoose, captivated Britain in the early 1930s. The Irving family, living in a farmhouse, claimed that a mongoose named Geff communicated with them. These unusual claims caught the attention of ghost hunters and parapsychologists who investigated the phenomenon. However, these investigators, along with other skeptics, eventually concluded that the events were a hoax, likely orchestrated through ventriloquism. The story began when the Irving family reported hearing persistent noises from the wooden panels of their farmhouse. These sounds included scratching, rustling, and even voices. The family told friends that a creature named Geff had introduced itself, claiming to be a mongoose from India, born in the 1850s. Geff described itself as an earth-brown spirit, warning that anyone who saw its true form would be turned into a pillar of salt. The Irvings claimed to have befriended Geff, who helped around the house by waking up anyone who overslept and chasing away mice. In 1935, Rex, the editor of a weekly magazine called The Listener, decided to investigate the story. Despite the outlandish nature of the claims, he aimed to remain objective. The family provided Rex with a hair they said was from Geff, which was later identified as dog hair. They also showed him bite marks, supposedly from Geff, which resembled those of a dog. The Irvings owned a sheepdog, leading Rex to believe he was being deceived. Several more investigators visited the family and concluded that the evidence of Geff's existence was unconvincing. Some psychologists suggested that the family might have had a condition that made them genuinely believe they were visited by a magical mongoose. The Great Unconformity represents a significant gap in the geological record, spanning between 100 million and 1 billion years. An unconformity refers to points where rock layers show a sudden and substantial time jump. This gap is evident in various rock formations around the world and remains one of geology's biggest puzzles. In the late 1860s, geologist John Powell discovered this phenomenon while researching in the Grand Canyon, finding that over 1 billion years of geological history had vanished. This site is now known as Powell's Great Unconformity. However, similar unconformities are found globally. It is estimated that over 10 billion cubic kilometers of geological record are missing, an enormous amount of history lost to time. There are two main theories to explain this mystery. Either something prevented new sediment from being deposited over an incredibly long period, or massive erosion erased the rock itself. Gustav is the name given to a massive Nile crocodile in Burundi, infamous for his alleged human attacks. Local legend claims Gustav has killed over 200 people, mainly along the Rusizi River and the northern shores of Lake Tanganyika. He is greatly feared and has attained mythical status among the locals. Since he has never been captured, his exact size remains uncertain, but estimates suggest he could be over 20 feet long and weigh around 2,000 pounds. Due to his enormous size, some believe Gustav might be at least 100 years old. However, an observational study found that he still has a near full set of teeth, suggesting he is more likely around 60 years old and potentially still growing. If encountered, Gustav can be identified by 3 bullet scars on his body and a deep scar on his right shoulder blade. Some herpetologists believe Gustav's size as a young crocodile made hunting fish difficult, forcing him to target larger, slower-moving prey like buffalo, hippos, and humans. This diet contributed to his massive size. It's also noted that Gustav often abandons his victims' corpses halfway through consumption. The mystery surrounding Gustav lies in his current whereabouts and whether he is indeed responsible for all the reported attacks. He hasn't been seen since around 2009 or 2010. A 2019 article in a Bujumbura travel guide claimed Gustav was killed, but critics argue this lacks evidence, particularly photographic proof. Thus, Gustav's fate and true impact remain unresolved. Around 2019, mysterious bundles of hair began appearing in Santa Barbara, California. The origin of the hair remains unknown. It could be from a human, an animal, or something else entirely. Some locals speculated that it might be some kind of fine root. Several residents reported witnessing people dropping these bundles before quickly running off, but the identities of these individuals remain a mystery. There isn't much information available about this phenomenon. One theory suggests that the hair bundles could be part of a tradition or ritual to ward off evil, but this, like other theories, is purely speculative. The true purpose and origin of these hair bundles remain unsolved. How To Basic is a YouTube channel based in Australia with over 17 million subscribers as of this recording. For those unfamiliar with the channel, the videos have mundane titles and thumbnails that suggest tutorials. However, instead of actual instructions, viewers get a chaotic display of destruction, often in a kitchen or bathroom, all filmed from a first-person perspective. The creator frequently throws or destroys various items, including food. A recurring gag in many videos is a man giving a thumbs up at the end before abruptly cutting to black. In March 2018, How To Basic uploaded a face reveal video, which has amassed over 41 million views. Instead of revealing the creator's face, the video was a parody featuring a variety of other YouTube creators, such as Michael Stevens of Vsauce and Maxmofo, each claiming to be How to Basic. This video celebrated hitting 10 million subscribers and only heightened the audience's curiosity about the creator's true identity. Various online sleuths attempted to decode potential clues within the video to uncover the creator's face. At the end of the face reveal video, a code briefly flashed on screen, translating to /V, part of every YouTube video URL. In the following upload, titled How to Make a Hawaiian Pizza, another clue appeared. When captions are turned on, there are no subtitles for most of the video, but during a specific scene, the word "you" appears when How to Basic falls. Other scattered and out-of-place texts have been noticed in different videos, but the puzzle remains unsolved. It turns out these clues were part of an alternate reality game that was eventually abandoned. As it stands, the true identity of How to Basic remains a mystery to the public. Primark is a clothing retailer similar to H&M. In one of its stores located in Colchester, a piece of human bone was discovered inside a pair of socks. The bone, believed to be part of a finger, raised concerns. The police were unsure if the bone was linked to a crime, as it didn't appear to be from a recent incident due to the lack of skin particles. The case has not progressed, and a Primark spokesperson stated that the company considers the matter closed. To this day, the identity of the bone's owner and the reason it ended up in the socks remain unknown. Indrid Cold, also known as the Smiling Man, is a well-known figure in American folklore dating back to the 1960s. Cold is human-like in appearance, but is widely believed to be an alien or have extraterrestrial connections. Standing 6 feet tall with slicked-back hair, he is often seen wearing a reflective suit. His most striking feature is his eerie, ear-to-ear grin. In November 1966, in Parkersburg, West Virginia, a man named Woodrow Derenberger had a bizarre encounter while driving home on Interstate 77. He heard a loud crash and saw a large, unidentified vehicle in front of his truck. Woodrow described it as a lamp-shaped structure with flared ends and a bulge in the middle. Indrid Cold emerged from the vehicle and approached Woodrow, communicating telepathically. Cold introduced himself and assured Woodrow that he meant no harm, only wanting to learn more about humans. The Jameson family, consisting of Bobby, 44, Sherilyn, 40, and Madison, 6, went missing in 2009 and were found dead in 2013. When their remains were initially discovered, authorities were unsure of their identity, but in 2014, they confirmed the remains belonged to the Jamisons. To this day, the cause of their deaths remains unknown, and the circumstances surrounding their disappearance are quite mysterious. The family's pickup truck was found abandoned in Latimer County, Oklahoma, a few days after they were reported missing. Inside the truck, police found their ID cards, phones, wallets, a GPS, a malnourished dog, and over $30,000 in cash, a suspicious amount as the Jamisons were not known to carry large sums of money. Surveillance footage from the family's home showed them making multiple trips between their truck and their house, as if they were packing to leave for an extended period. Their movements were described as trance-like by one officer. Investigators noted a brown briefcase placed carefully inside the vehicle, which was never found. The family also owned a handgun that was missing from their home. In November 2013, 2 hunters discovered the skeletal remains of 2 adults and a child in a remote area of Latimer County, less than 3 miles from where the family's truck was found. Due to the advanced decomposition, the cause of death could not be determined, although a large hole in Bobby's skull led some to speculate he was shot. However, medical examiners could not confirm this due to the damage caused by animals in the area. Several theories emerged regarding the family's disappearance. Some suggested they faked their own deaths or were involved in a cult. Investigators found that Bobby was in a heated lawsuit with his father, Bob Dean Jamison, who Bobby claimed had threatened the family and struck him with a vehicle. Despite these allegations and Bob Dean's involvement in criminal activities, police did not believe he was connected to the family's disappearance. The mention of drugs led some to speculate that Bobby might have been involved in illegal drug activity, and the large sum of cash in their truck was part of a drug deal gone wrong. Others believed the family was depressed and turned to substances, potentially explaining their trance-like behavior on camera and possibly leading to a hallucinatory episode resulting in their deaths. Finally, the theory that the Jamisons were involved in a cult gained traction. According to the family's pastor, both he and the family had seen spirits in their home, and Bobby was frequently reading from a satanic text. Despite these numerous theories, the true circumstances behind the Jamison family's tragic end remain unresolved. Jennifer Fergate is the alias of an unidentified woman who died in 1995, with her true identity and the circumstances of her death still a mystery. There are numerous theories about who she might have been, ranging from a serial killer to a mentally unstable criminal or even a spy. In early June 1995, Jennifer checked into the Plaza Hotel in Oslo, Norway, without any identification. Oddly, she misspelled her surname as Fergat multiple times during check-in. Rumors suggest she arrived with a person named Lois Fergate, who left shortly after Jennifer secured the room. Several days after Jennifer checked in, hotel staff noticed the room had no associated credit card. When they went to investigate, they found a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. As one employee knocked, a gunshot was heard from inside. Security arrived 15 minutes later to find the room double-bolted from the inside and a foul odor emanating. Inside, they discovered Jennifer's body on the bed with a gun nearby, a weapon typically used by the military and high-level criminals. Initially labeled a suicide, the case became more suspicious upon further investigation. Jennifer had no purse, ID, passport, credit card, or money. She only brought black tops and no lower body clothing besides what she was wearing. Despite having no ID or payment, she somehow obtained the room. Guests mentioned a strange Belgian man who stayed across from Jennifer and frequently peeked out and roamed the floor. This man checked out the night before Jennifer's death and was later found by police, but cleared of any suspicion. Crucially, security footage was never reviewed, and much of the evidence was lost or destroyed. Jennifer was eventually buried in an unmarked grave. Norwegian journalist Lars Wegner later investigated the case, believing it was not a suicide. He tracked the address Jennifer gave to a small Belgian village, but locals did not recognize her from a photograph. Lars obtained a log of every key card entry into her room, revealing she spent most of her time inside, except for a 20-hour period between Thursday and Friday before her death. Lars proposed two theories, both suggesting Jennifer was involved in the criminal underworld. One theory posits she was involved in international smuggling, while the other suggests she was a sought-after sex worker. Theories abound that Jennifer was an international spy or contract killer, potentially tied to international negotiations between high-ranking officials from Israel and Palestine taking place at the hotel. Despite decades of investigation, the true identity and story of Jennifer Fergate remain an enigma. Jerome of Sandy Cove. On September 8, 1863, a man was discovered on the beach of Sandy Cove, Nova Scotia, with only a tiny bit of water and a meager amount of food beside him. This man, who became known as Jerome, had no legs, only short stumps. When locals questioned him, they learned very little, as he did not speak English. He was discovered by an 8-year-old child named George Albright, who brought the shivering man back to his home. George's parents nursed Jerome back to health, and medical professionals determined that his legs had been professionally amputated by a skilled surgeon. The bandages on his stumps indicated that the amputation was recent. Jerome did not respond to any attempts at communication, even when approached by speakers of French, Latin, Italian, and Spanish. He was described as shunning attention, sometimes growling at visitors. As the Albright family could not afford to feed another person for long, Jerome was moved between various local households. Eventually, a group of Baptists sent him to a French community, believing he was Catholic. The Nova Scotia government granted Jerome a small stipend of $2 a week. Jerome eventually ended up in a home near Digby, where his fame grew. The homeowners began charging an admission fee for people to see him. Jerome lived there until his death in April 1912. One popular theory suggested that Jerome was a sailor who attempted a mutiny, failed, and was punished by amputation. Others believed he might have had a brain injury that affected his ability to speak. However, A later discovery provided a potential solution to the mystery of Jerome. A newspaper clipping from the early 2000s claimed that Jerome was left behind by a ship. It stated that Jerome had worked at a lumber company in New Brunswick. One winter night, he got lost, fell between logs in a mill pond, and eventually wandered into a sawmill where he fell asleep. When he woke up, his legs were completely frozen. Rescuers brought a surgeon who immediately amputated both legs above the knee due to the severe damage. Fearing liability, Jerome's employer allegedly asked the fisherman to dispose of him, leading to his abandonment at Sandy Cove. This account is supported by the detail that when Jerome was asked about his legs, he reportedly said the word cold, aligning with the story of severe frostbite. The true identity and full story of Jerome may never be known, but this theory provides a plausible explanation for the mysterious man with amputated legs found on a Nova Scotia beach. John Doe number 24 refers to a deaf and blind man from Jacksonville, Illinois, who was institutionalized in the 1940s. At the age of 18, he was placed in the Lincoln Development Center, a mental health facility, where he spent 30 years. In the 1970s, he was transferred several times and eventually ended up in a senior center in Peoria, Illinois. He died in 1993 at the age of 64. The story of John Doe number 24 began in October 1945, when a pair of police officers found a black teenager wandering suspiciously around Jacksonville. The teenager was deaf and unable to communicate verbally. When asked why he was wandering, he wrote the name Lewis, which many investigators believed to be his actual name. However, no additional information could be found about him. Due to his inability to communicate effectively and the lack of identification, the young man was placed into the mental health system and was given the name John Doe number 24. In 1978, he was officially named John Doe Boyd so he could apply for Social Security benefits. Despite this, many people who learned of his story felt frustrated that he was consistently referred to as John Doe instead of the name Lewis, which was thought to be his real name. Johnny Joe Shields was a 32-year-old man who disappeared in December 1988 from Carter Lake, Iowa. At the time of his disappearance, Johnny left behind his pickup truck, all of his belongings, and his bank account showed no further activity. Johnny worked at a fish market, but aside from these basic details, little else is known about the circumstances of his disappearance. It is suggested that he was taken against his will, but specific details or evidence supporting this conclusion are not readily available. The case remains unsolved, and information about Johnny Joe Shields is sparse, contributing to the cold status of the case. Caspar Hauser, a mysterious figure from 19th century Germany, remains one of the most enigmatic individuals in history. His story begins in 1828, when he appeared in Nuremberg, Germany, claiming to have spent his entire life in a dark, solitary cell. He was about 15 or 16 years old at the time and spoke very little, repeating only the phrase, "I want to be a cavalryman, as my father was." This strange declaration, combined with his disheveled appearance and apparent intellectual impairment, led many to speculate about his origins and the truth of his claims. Hauser's account of his early life was as follows. He described being kept in a small cell, approximately 2 meters long, 1 meter wide, and 1.5 meters high, with only a straw bed and 2 wooden toys, one carved into a horse and the other into a dog. He received bread and water daily, and the water occasionally tasted bitter, causing him to fall into a deep sleep. During these periods, his straw bed was changed and his nails and hair were trimmed. Hauser mentioned a mystery man who taught him how to write his name and instructed him to say the phrase about wanting to be a cavalryman, though he admitted not understanding its meaning. Initially, Hauser was adopted by the town of Nuremberg, with residents making donations to support his living expenses and education. However, as he settled into his new life, several incidents raised doubts about his story. Hauser sustained a deep cut on his forehead and claimed it was inflicted by the mystery man who had kept him in confinement. Skeptics suspected Hauser might have inflicted the wound himself for attention. Another suspicious event involved Hauser claiming he accidentally fell off a chair, knocking a pistol off the wall and injuring himself. Many found this story implausible, leading to increased skepticism about his reliability. On December 14, 1833, Hauser returned home with a deep chest wound, claiming a stranger had lured him to a location and then stabbed him. The police investigation revealed a small bag with a note containing a cryptic message about the attacker's origin. Hauser died from the chest wound 3 days later. The inconsistencies between Hauser's account and the evidence at the crime scene fueled suspicions that he might have staged the attack to regain attention. In retrospect, forensic experts believed Hauser's wound could have been self-inflicted, possibly intended to be less severe. Some psychiatrists, as recently as 1970, suggested that Hauser's accounts were so absurd that it was astonishing anyone took them seriously. They proposed that he might have had a mental illness and had become so immersed in his own lies that he believed them to be true. Additionally, it is argued that Hauser's diet of primarily bread would likely have led to scurvy or other health issues if his story were true. A more intriguing theory suggests Hauser might have been the hereditary Prince of Baden, born in 1812 but swapped for a dying infant. If true, the real prince could have resurfaced as Kaspar Hauser after being hidden away for over a decade. Despite these theories, the true nature of Hauser's origins and his mysterious death remains unresolved. Kathy Page, a 34-year-old mother of two, was found deceased in a car accident on the early morning of May 14, 1991. Initially, it seemed like a tragic mishap, but investigators quickly noticed peculiarities that suggested otherwise. For instance, the car showed minimal damage, the open drinks in the front seat had not spilled, and Kathy's feet were oddly positioned against the seat rather than extended towards the pedals, as one would expect from a real accident. Additionally, Kathy was not wearing a seatbelt, yet her body was found seated upright rather than thrown forward. These inconsistencies led investigators to conclude that the accident had been staged. When they visited Kathy's home, which was just 100 yards from the accident scene, they were greeted by her husband, Steve. The detective immediately found Steve's behavior suspicious. Steve claimed that Kathy was not home and nervously glanced down the street towards the site of the accident. His emotional responses were inconsistent. He cried, threw himself on the couch, then immediately composed himself, which struck the detective as peculiar. As the investigation progressed, detectives focused on Steve. He insisted on his innocence, maintaining that he had not killed Kathy. Steve explained that although his 13-year marriage with Kathy began well, they had grown apart and Kathy had been trying to find herself. They had even discussed a temporary separation. Despite Steve's openness, detectives discovered that he and Kathy had actually filed for divorce. Kathy's sister noted that Kathy had been moving on and was relieved to be leaving her past behind. Medical examiners found signs of strangulation on Kathy's body, a broken nose, and bloodstains on her underwear and skin, but no blood on her outer clothing. An investigator remarked that Kathy was likely killed elsewhere, cleaned up, redressed, and then placed back in her car. Further investigation revealed that Kathy was supposed to meet a female friend after work around 11:30 p.m., but she actually met her boyfriend instead. The autopsy confirmed that Kathy had engaged in sexual activity with her boyfriend, but also indicated the presence of semen from another male, which was inconsistent with her boyfriend's vasectomy. Steve had also undergone a vasectomy months prior to Kathy's death. Steve admitted to having sex with Kathy that night before she left, but Kathy's sister had previously stated that there was no romance left in Kathy's marriage, casting doubt on this claim. The police theorized that after returning home from visiting her boyfriend, Kathy showered and removed her makeup and jewelry before bed. While Steve was asleep on the couch, Kathy's return might have led to an argument that escalated into a violent confrontation, ending with Steve strangling Kathy. Steve denies this theory, and to this day, he remains a person of interest in the case. Kathy's family won a wrongful death lawsuit against Steve, but the full truth of what happened remains unresolved. Kenneka Jenkins was a young woman found dead inside a freezer at a Chicago hotel in September 2017. She had told her mother, Teresa, that she was going out with friends to celebrate a new job at a nursing home and would return home late. Although she mentioned going bowling and to a movie, Kenika and her friends actually attended a party on the 9th floor of the Crowne Plaza Chicago O'Hare Hotel. During the party, Kenika and her friends posted videos online which showed they weren't enjoying themselves. Around 3 a.m., they decided to leave. At some point, Kenika either lost her keys and phone and went back to the 9th floor to retrieve them, or was left alone in the hotel lobby while her friends went to get her belongings. The exact details are unclear, but Kenika was alone for about 20 minutes. When her friends realized she was missing, they searched the hotel, including the 9th floor, but found no trace of her. By 4 a.m., the group called Teresa, hoping Kenika had gone home early. Teresa, who was troubled by the friends' accounts and their apparent inebriation, went to the hotel. She requested help from the front desk and asked to review the security footage, but the hotel staff refused, stating that only the police could view it. Teresa was also concerned because Kenika, who had a low tolerance for alcohol, had supposedly only had one drink, which didn't seem plausible. Police were contacted just after 7 a.m., and by 1 p.m., they had thoroughly searched the hotel, but found no sign of Kenika. They initially didn't review the footage, relying on the hotel's claim that they had already searched it. However, around 10 p.m., a police officer decided to check the footage themselves and discovered Kenika stumbling through the hallways around 3:20 a.m. She was seen entering an elevator, then walking upstairs and into a men's restroom. From there, she wandered into the kitchen, which was under renovation and thus unoccupied, and eventually into a freezer. Kenika was found dead in the freezer, having succumbed to hypothermia. The autopsy revealed no signs of physical injury or struggle, but Kenika's blood alcohol content was measured at 0.12%, indicating she was legally drunk. Additionally, traces of topiramate, a drug for epilepsy and migraines, were found in her system. Although the incident appeared to be a tragic accident exacerbated by alcohol, both Kenika's family and some theorists suspect foul play. One theory suggests that Kenika's friends might have been involved, though there is no concrete evidence to support this. Another theory is that the hotel staff might have tampered with the footage to cover up misconduct. The hotel had received noise complaints about the party and was criticized for not shutting it down, as well as for not securing the freezer area properly. In 2018, Kenika's family filed a $50 million lawsuit against the hotel for negligence related to her death. Kirsty Bentley, a teenager from Ashburton, New Zealand, went missing in late December 1998 while walking the family dog. Her body was discovered in January 1999, about 25 miles from her hometown. Born on January 18, 1983, Kirsty was the second child in her family. Described as vibrant, energetic, and compassionate, she had difficulty opening up to new people. On the day of her disappearance, Kirsty met a friend at the Ashburton Library around 10:30 a.m. They went shopping and then stopped at a McDonald's for a break, with the time reaching around 12 p.m. Later, Kirsty's friend's sister arrived, and Kirsty was dropped off back home. At around 2:40 p.m., Kirsty tried calling her boyfriend, but didn't reach him, so she decided to take the family's black Labrador for a walk before trying again. After Kirsty returned home, her brother John was upstairs and unaware of her arrival. When their mother, Jill, came home, she called Kirsty's boyfriend, who had no information on her whereabouts. John searched the immediate area, but found no trace of Kirsty. By the time their father, Sidney, came home and learned of Kirsty's disappearance, he contacted the police, and a search effort was launched. Despite the extensive searches by police, family, friends, and search dogs, no clues were found initially. The following morning, around 10 a.m., the family dog was discovered tied to a tree beside the Ashburton River. The area had been searched the previous day, raising questions about why the dog wasn't found earlier. It was speculated that the dog may have been recently left there or hidden among the foliage. Upon researching the area, police found some of Kirsty's belongings, including her shorts and underwear. Kirsty's body was not found until January 17, 1999, when two hikers discovered a decomposed body in a patch of overgrown shrubs in the Camp Goley area, about 25 miles from Ashburton. The body was partially covered with branches and leaves and was in a fetal position. Medical officials determined that Kirsty had died from blunt force trauma to the right side of her head, with the impact so severe that she likely died shortly after the injury. It is believed that Kirsty was killed soon after her disappearance and placed in the Camp Goli area that same night. Numerous suspects were considered, with some even still under investigation. Initially, Kirsty's father and brother were suspects, but both denied involvement. In 2018, police cleared them of any suspicion, and Kirsty's boyfriend was also ruled out. A rare 1961 Commer van seen near Kirsty's last known location became a key lead. Despite multiple sightings reported, the van has never been found, and no significant leads have emerged. La Mancha Negra, or the Black Stain, refers to a mysterious black substance that began appearing on the roads around Caracas, Venezuela in 1986. Despite extensive research and significant financial investment by the Venezuelan government, the nature of this substance remains unknown. The problem first surfaced when workers repairing a section of highway noticed the black ooze. The substance quickly spread, covering up to 8 miles of the road. Its appearance and behavior were erratic. It expanded and contracted with temperature changes, becoming more prominent in hot weather and shrinking in the cold. The black substance created hazardous driving conditions, leading to numerous accidents and fatalities. Nearly 2,000 deaths over a span of 5 years. The Venezuelan government initially hypothesized that the substance was a mix of oil and dust. They attempted to remove it using pressurized water, but this approach failed. They then tried to absorb the ooze with tons of crushed limestone, which did remove the substance, but left the roads extremely dusty and made the air unbreathable. In 1996, the substance suddenly disappeared, leaving behind only questions. Various theories emerged regarding its origin. One theory suggested that raw sewage from nearby slums, which seeped under the asphalt, caused a chemical reaction that deteriorated the roads. Another more widely accepted theory proposed that the ooze resulted from a buildup of dust and oil from old vehicles, which combined over time to form the sticky substance. Despite these theories, the exact cause of La Mancha Negra remains a mystery. The Lane Bryant shooting occurred on February 2, 2008, at a Lane Bryant clothing store in Illinois, resulting in the deaths of 5 individuals and 1 injury. To this day, the perpetrator has not been identified. On that day, a man pretending to be a delivery driver entered the store and brandished a firearm. He then forced 4 customers, a part-time employee, and the store manager into a back room where he proceeded to shoot them all. The sole survivor provided a description to the police, leading to the creation of a composite sketch. The gunman was described as a black male with thick cornrowed hair, standing between 6 and 6'2" tall, and estimated to be in his late 20s to mid-30s at the time of the crime. When police arrived, they locked down the shopping center and conducted a thorough search, but no suspects or evidence were found. The original Lane Bryant store was eventually demolished, and a TJ Maxx was built on the site. The motive for the crime remains unclear, as the store did not hold a significant amount of cash, and other locations would have been more lucrative targets. Las Noches del Hombre Lobo, translated as Nights of the Wolfman, is a 1968 Spanish horror film that remains shrouded in mystery and controversy. Directed by René Govar, the film has never been released in theaters or surfaced online, leading many to question its existence. Paul Naschy, a prominent Spanish actor known for his roles in horror films, was the lead actor and claimed to have been deeply involved in the film's production, including writing the script. He also mentioned that some scenes were filmed in Paris. Despite his claims, there is no evidence of René Govar's existence in the film industry, and other lead actors mentioned by Naschy also appear to be non-existent. The story surrounding the film's disappearance adds to the enigma. According to Naschy, René Govar died in a car accident shortly after the film was sent for processing. However, the film's processing facility did not receive payment for the service fees, leading to the film being misplaced. Naschy's assertions about the film's existence were unwavering until his death, but skepticism persists among his fans and film enthusiasts. They speculate that Naschy might have fabricated the film's details to enhance his resume or create a sense of mystique around his career. The film's elusive nature, combined with the lack of corroborating evidence, has made Las Noches del Hombre Lobo a fascinating topic of discussion and a subject of intrigue in the world of lost or unreleased films. Le Loyon is a cryptid or urban legend associated with the woods near the Swiss town of Mals. Described as a humanoid figure, he is said to be seen wearing a suit, military cloak, and a gas mask that obscures his face. This unsettling appearance has led some to question whether Le Loyon is a true cryptid or merely an urban legend. The legend surrounding Le Loyon includes a chilling story that the individual behind the mask took their own life in the woods, leaving behind abandoned clothing and a note written in French. The note's translated text begins with, "Dear Patrick Matten, not only are you an insult, but you are above all an assassin. You murdered a very harmless being who found in his walks a real therapy of happiness, a cerebral resourcing allowing him to face the responsibilities of his normal life. The ghost cannot explain this happiness, but you do not seem to know. You will discover that it takes everything to make a world." The note seems to suggest a personal grievance and a deep sense of betrayal or misunderstanding. Believers in the legend speculate that Le Loyon might be a hermit who enjoys solitary walks and has become a figure of local lore due to his mysterious appearance and the unsettling circumstances surrounding the legend. However, whether Le Loyon is a genuine cryptid or just an elaborate urban myth remains debated. The mystery and eerie nature of the story contribute to its enduring intrigue. The lead mask case centers around the mysterious deaths of two Brazilian electronic technicians, Miguel José Viana and Manuel Pereira de Cruz. Last seen on August 17, 1966, their bodies were discovered 3 days later, on August 20th, on a hilltop. The bodies were found wearing crude lead eye masks, hence the case's name. It was a sunny but windy day when a young boy playing with a kite on the hill stumbled upon the bodies. Terrified, he ran home to alert his parents, who then contacted the police. The authorities faced difficulties reaching the bodies due to the rough terrain and had to wait until the following day to investigate. When they arrived, they found an unusual scene. Both men wore lead masks, raincoats, and black suits, and were partially covered in grass, though it didn't appear they were trying to conceal the bodies. Nearby were an empty water bottle, a small packet of wet towels, and a notebook with cryptic messages, including one that read, 1630, be at the specified location, 1830, ingest capsules after the effect protect metals await signal mask. Police identified the men and pieced together their last days. After leaving work on August 17th, Manuel and Miguel took a bus from Campos to gather supplies, withdrawing a large sum of cash and buying a used vehicle. Receipts found on their bodies showed they purchased raincoats and a bottle of water in Nioi, where a bar waitress noted their nervous behavior, particularly Miguel, who frequently checked his watch. They left the bar in a black vehicle, driven by two unidentified men, and were never seen again. It's presumed they went directly to the hill. Medical examiners found no obvious injuries or trauma, but crucial toxicology tests were not performed due to an overburdened coroner's office, leading to decomposition that prevented determining the cause of death. This left authorities to speculate on the men's intentions and the nature of their deaths. Theories include foul play or a failed attempt to contact extraterrestrials. According to one theory, Manuel and Miguel were part of a group of scientific spiritualists and planned a ritual to make contact with aliens. The lead masks might have been used to shield their eyes from alien light. Supporting this, some reports mentioned a UFO sighting over the hill and a device the men had built to contact aliens. The device had broken down shortly before the incident, possibly linked to the alphanumeric codes found in their notebook. Alternatively, another theory suggests the men were deceived into visiting the hill by con artists who posed as spiritualists, providing poison capsules under the guise of a ritual. The group might have robbed them after their deaths. Additionally, a similar case years earlier involved another electronic Lewis technician Hamilton found a British with a lead race car mask, driver competing possibly in Formula 1 suggesting from a pattern Mercedes, of has had an targeting illustrious victims. career, Both theories remain winning a joint speculative, record of with 7 no world conclusive evidence championship to confirm titles. either. However, many fans believe he should be an 8-time world champion due to controversial events during the 2007 season in China and Brazil. At that time, Hamilton had a 12-point lead that was unexpectedly lost, leading to speculation and conspiracy theories regarding internal tampering. In 2012, Hamilton hinted in an interview that he had since learned more about what happened in the 2007 races, though he couldn't disclose details. To understand the conspiracy theories, it's essential to look into the Spygate scandal. This involved McLaren, Hamilton's team at the time, being investigated by the FIA for receiving nearly 700 pages of confidential documents about Ferrari's car from Nigel Stepney, a former Ferrari chief mechanic. As a result, McLaren was fined $100 million and faced potential disqualification if Ferrari's designs were found in their car. During the 2007 Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai, Hamilton was leading despite the rain. Skipping a pit stop, he stayed out on worn tires. The rain stopped, then resumed, and Hamilton's worn tires left him with little grip. He attempted to pit, but skidded into a gravel trap, losing his lead, but still qualifying for the next race. In the Brazilian Grand Prix, Hamilton locked up at turn 4 and re-entered the track in 7th place. Later, he lost gears and had to coast while his team guided him through a reboot. Despite recovering, miscommunication led to an extra pit stop, costing him the race and the championship. Theories abound about the mishaps in these races. Some suggest the FIA sabotaged McLaren to prevent them from winning post-Spygate. Others believe McLaren favored Fernando Alonso over Hamilton, or that McLaren feared too much attention if Hamilton won, given the Spygate scandal. Ultimately, while the 2007 season remains a topic of debate and speculation, Hamilton's career has continued to be marked by significant success and numerous championships. Richard John Bingham, more commonly known as Lord Lucan, was a British peer who vanished under mysterious circumstances after being suspected of murder. Lucan was known for his affluent lifestyle, his love for gambling, and his membership in the exclusive Claremont Club. His lavish lifestyle included racing powerboats and driving luxury cars, and he was even considered for the role of James Bond during the initial cinematic adaptations of the novels. In 1963, Lucan married Veronica Duncan, but their marriage ended in divorce in 1972. The subsequent, bitter custody battle for their children saw Lucan lose, which left him furious and obsessed with regaining custody. This obsession led to him spying on his wife and listening in on her phone conversations. The strain from these actions, combined with the legal expenses and his gambling losses, pushed Lucan into a state of mental and emotional turmoil. On November 7, 1974, Sandra Rivet, the nanny of Lucan's children, was found bludgeoned to death in the kitchen of the family's home. The discovery of a blood-stained towel in Veronica's first-floor bedroom and an extensive amount of blood on the basement staircase near Rivet's body indicated a violent struggle. A blood-stained pipe was also found at the scene. With no signs of forced entry and the known tension between Lucan and Veronica, Lucan became the prime suspect. Lucan's last known address revealed nothing unusual, with his bed neatly made, his Mercedes parked outside with a cold engine, and his passport still in his bedside drawer. After Rivet's murder, Lucan made 2 phone calls to his mother. In the second call, he told her that something had happened at Veronica's home and she should pick up the children. It was later discovered that Lucan had fled to a friend's residence in East Sussex a few hours after the murder. Only his friend's wife, Susan, was present. Lucan wrote 2 letters and left them with Susan before disappearing. The letters suggested that Lucan believed he had been framed for Sandra's murder. By the time a public announcement was made for his arrest, Lucan had already vanished. His abandoned car was found in New Haven, with its interior stained with blood. A lead pipe wrapped in bandages, similar to the one found at the crime scene, was discovered in the trunk. An inquest held in 1975 concluded that Lucan had killed Sandra Rivet. Despite extensive press coverage, public interest, and numerous alleged sightings of Lucan over the years, none have been substantiated. Lucan's fate after the murder remains unknown, and his claims of being framed have never been proven. The mystery of what happened to Lord Lucan continues to intrigue and baffle investigators and the public alike. Lisa Marie Young, a 21-year-old Indigenous woman from Nanaimo, British Columbia, vanished without a trace in the early hours of July 1st, 2002, making her case one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in Canadian history. Celebrating her recent birthday, Lisa attended a house party on June 30th, leaving with a man driving a red Jaguar, intending to get something to eat. Distressed messages she sent to a friend indicated she was in trouble and needed a ride, but she was never seen again. Despite identifying and questioning the driver, no charges were brought, and the exact details of their interaction remain unclear. Authorities suspect foul play, given the sudden end of all contact and the nature of her last messages. Lisa's family and the local Indigenous community have tirelessly campaigned for answers, highlighting the broader issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada and the systemic failures in addressing these cases. Despite ongoing efforts and renewed calls for information, especially on the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, Lisa's fate remains unknown. The Man in the Iron Mask, popularized by Alexandre Dumas in his novel The Vicomte of Bragelonne 10 years later, tells a tale of mystery and intrigue within the French court of the 17th century. Dumas's fictional account, which inspired the 1998 film adaptation, centers on a secret twin brother of King Louis XIV, imprisoned and masked to keep his identity hidden. The real story behind this legend is equally enigmatic. Arrested in 1669 under the name Eustache Dober, this prisoner was confined for 34 years, during which time his face was purportedly covered by a velvet mask, not iron. His true identity remains a subject of debate, with some historians suggesting he was a mere valet who overheard sensitive information, while others propose he was a noble or even a close relative of the king. The man was meticulously guarded, with strict instructions to limit his communication, and was moved between several prisons, including the infamous Bastille. Despite being recorded under different names, including Marchioli, at his death in 1703, no conclusive evidence has surfaced to definitively identify him. Theories range from an Italian diplomat to a disgraced French general, but each hypothesis raises more questions than answers. Miss X is the name given to an unidentified woman whose deceased body was found on March 18, 1967, in Delaware. Initially, it was believed that she had died during or after an illegal abortion attempt. However, medical examiners later determined that the true cause of death was sepsis, though her body showed clear signs of abuse, indicating foul play. Miss X was found lying on the side of a road, wearing only a set of underwear with the labels removed. A red ribbon in her hair kept it from falling into her face, and a laundry bag with the text, Bago Storage American Laundry Dry Cleaning X45277, covered part of her lower body. This led investigators to believe that the possible killer owned a dry cleaning business, or that Miss X herself was an employee at one. Initially, medical examiners found a substance used in abortion procedures inside her vaginal cavity, leading them to think she had died from a failed abortion. Later, it was determined that she died from an untreated infection. This led to the theory that Miss X's body was disposed of by the person performing the illegal abortion to avoid detection and imprisonment. The laundry bag covering her body was traced to American Laundry in Trenton, New Jersey. The business owner remembered a young woman matching Miss X's description, but had no further information about her. Fortunately, this case was partially solved recently. Miss X was identified in January of this year as Petrona Patmos. Petrona was born in Greece and adopted into the Patmos family, who later immigrated to the United States. Her DNA was matched to her younger half-brother, who had been looking for her for years. The initial difficulty in matching the DNA was due to them being half-siblings. Despite identifying her, it remains unknown who left Petrona's body on the side of the road. Moha Moha is a legendary sea creature said to inhabit the waters around the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. It is described as resembling a turtle, with a long neck, a large dome-shaped back, and a massive fish-like tail. Sightings report the creature measuring about 30 feet in length and 8 feet in width, with its shell standing approximately 5 feet in height. The first reported sighting of Moha Moha occurred in 1890 by a woman named S. Lavelle, a teacher in Queensland. Within a few days, 9 additional sightings were reported by different people. Despite these accounts, some accused Lavelle of being a liar and a mythomaniac, prone to psychotic behavior. Local residents feared Moha Moha, as rumors spread that the creature would attack coastal camps and occasionally drag people into the water by their legs. The Mokele Mbembe is reputed to be a large reptile-like creature with a long neck and long tail. I know this also should be in the cryptids Iceberg, but since it's here, I'll just cover it quickly. Despite being a herbivore, it is said to roar aggressively if approached by humans. Some say it has a single horn, which it uses to kill elephants. Many a Western explorer over the years has been gripped by the tantalizing possibility that they could discover a creature, a formidable one at that has remained as yet unknown to science. To date, there have been more than 50 expeditions external to the region, but no scientific evidence unless you include the large claw-shaped footprint recorded by a French missionary in 1776 and by a number of others since. The only photographic images have been so fuzzy they prove nothing. But there is no shortage of eyewitness reports. I was in a boat on the river when I saw Mokele Mbembe. He began to chase us, one man told the BBC. From the late 1960s to the mid-1980s, an unidentified Italian serial killer known as the Monster of Florence terrorized the province of Florence. The killer is believed to have murdered between 14 and 16 people, primarily targeting young couples in their cars. The first recorded incident occurred around midnight on October 21, 1968, involving Antonio Lobianco and Barbara Lacci, aged 29 and 32 respectively. Barbara had also brought along her 6-year-old son, Natalino, who awoke to find the car crashed and both adults dead from bullet wounds. Natalino sought help and informed the authorities that Antonio was one of Barbara's many lovers and not his father. Despite the initial lack of evidence, Barbara's husband, Stefano Mella, was convicted, primarily due to public pressure and changing testimonies from Natalino. However, Mella's conviction was thrown into doubt when another couple was murdered with the same gun while he was in prison. Subsequent murders followed a similar pattern, with couples being shot and stabbed while in their cars. One notable case involved 19-year-old Pasquale Gentlecore and 18-year-old Stefania Pettini, who were brutally killed in Pasquale's Fiat 127. Stefania had mentioned a strange man making her uneasy shortly before her death, and another friend reported a man following them during a driving lesson days before the murders. The pattern of the killings wasn't recognized until 1981, by which time 10 to 12 people had already been murdered. One of the main suspects, Pietro Pacciani, had a violent history, including the rape and abuse of his daughters and the murder of a man dating his ex-girlfriend. He was convicted in 1994 but released in 1996 due to a lack of solid evidence and poor police work. Numerous other suspects have been considered over the years, but no definitive evidence has been found. An interesting but unlikely theory suggests a connection between the Monster of Florence and the Zodiac Killer. Journalist Francesco Amicone claimed that a man named Giuseppe Bevilacqua had confessed to murders linked to both the Monster and the Zodiac cases. Bevilacqua, an undercover CID agent in San Francisco during the 60s and 70s, allegedly moved to Florence around the time the Zodiac murders stopped and the monsters began. However, despite requests for DNA testing and investigations, no concrete evidence has linked Bevilacqua to the crimes, and the case remains unsolved. Morgan Nick was a 6-year-old girl from Alma, Arkansas, who was abducted on the night of June 9, 1995. Morgan, her mom, and some friends were attending a Little League game when she was taken by an unidentified man while emptying sand from her shoes near a parking lot. Witnesses saw Morgan playing with other kids at the park nearby, and around the time of her disappearance, a red Ford pickup truck with a white camper also vanished. Investigators believe the truck's owner is likely the abductor, and the vehicle was described as having Arkansas plates with a damaged camper that made it several inches too short for the truck. The suspect is described as a white male, approximately 6 feet tall, with a solid build and a beard, and estimated to be in his late 20s to mid-30s. Despite numerous leads and a $60,000 reward offered for Morgan's recovery and the identification of her abductor, No solid information on her whereabouts has been found. The investigation remains active, with various leads being pursued across the United States. Morgan's family continues to hope for her safe return. The Mount Asahi incident involves a mysterious SOS sign discovered by helicopter pilots near the mountain in July of 1989. The sign, made of birch logs, had each letter about 16 feet long and 10 feet wide. It was located about 2 miles north of where a rescue team later found a group of hikers. When these hikers were taken to a hospital and questioned, they were unaware of any SOS sign and denied creating it. Suspecting there might be more people in need of rescue, Hokkaido police investigated the area near the sign. They discovered a human skeleton with bite marks from animals. The skeleton was identified as male, and examination revealed that several bones had been broken before death. Near the skeleton, police found a backpack containing a tape recorder. The tape recorder had the following recording. The Music on the Moon incident occurred during the Apollo 10 mission, which served as a practice run for the Apollo 11 moon landing. While circling the moon and testing the lunar module, the spacecraft lost contact with mission control when it reached the far side of the moon. During this period of radio silence, the astronauts on board, Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan, reported hearing eerie, outer space-type music. Eugene Cernan described the sounds as whistling and wooing, with occasional howling noises. Despite the unusual nature of the sounds, the astronauts chose to downplay the incident, likely to avoid any questioning about their mental health that could jeopardize their careers. Initially, one theory suggested that the noises were static from a magnetic field or atmospheric interference. However, this was quickly dismissed because the moon lacks both a magnetic field and an atmosphere. NASA's official explanation was that the radios on the command module and the lunar module were interfering with each other, producing the unusual noise. Despite NASA's explanation, some enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists remain skeptical, suggesting that something else might have caused the mysterious sounds. The incident continues to intrigue and fuel speculation about what the Apollo 10 astronauts experienced on the dark side of the moon. The New Bedford Highway Killer is an unidentified serial killer linked to the deaths of at least 9 women and the disappearances of 2 others in New Bedford, Massachusetts, between March 1988 and April 1989. The victims, primarily sex workers or those struggling with addiction, were abducted from New Bedford and found in nearby towns such as Dartmouth, Freetown, and Westport along Route 140. Among the victims was Robin Lynn Rhodes, also known as Bobby Lynn, who was discovered on March 28, 1989, after going missing a year earlier. Rhodes, who had a young child and a history of addiction, was acquainted with several other victims and had dated a suspect named Kenneth Ponte. Rochelle Clifford Dopierala, 28, vanished in April 1988, and her body was found later that year, beaten to death. She had connections to Ponte as well. Another victim, Deborah Lynn McConnell, 25, was last seen in May 1988, and her body was discovered in December of that year. Deborah Medeiros, 29, was found in July 1988, having been strangled. Other victims include Christina Montero, 19, and Marilyn Cardoza Roberts, 34, who remain missing, as well as Nancy Lee Paiva, 36, whose body was found in July 1988. Deborah Greenlaw DeMello, 35, was found in November 1988, and Mary Rose Santos, 26, was discovered in March 1989. The final known victim, Sandra Botello, 24, was found in April 1989. Despite several suspects, including Anthony DeGrazia and Kenneth Ponte, no one has been conclusively linked to the murders. DeGrazia, a construction worker, faced numerous allegations, but was never indicted and was later found dead under suspicious circumstances. Ponte, a New Bedford attorney, was charged with one of the murders, but had the charges dropped due to lack of evidence. Another potential suspect, Daniel Tavares, claimed responsibility for the killings while in prison, but was never conclusively linked to the crimes. Additionally, There were speculations about the Lisbon Ripper being connected due to similarities in the crimes and the presence of a sizable Portuguese community in New Bedford. Despite extensive investigations, the identity of the New Bedford highway killer remains unknown. The Ningen is a Japanese urban legend about a mysterious aquatic humanoid creature rumored to inhabit the sub-Antarctic oceans. The name Ningen means human in Japanese, and the creature is described as having a whale-like body with human-like features such as arms, legs, and a face. The legend gained widespread attention around 2012 when a forum post on the Japanese website 2channel described an encounter by the crew of a whaling ship. According to the post, the crew initially mistook the creature for a submarine. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was a living creature, which then quickly dove back underwater, never to be seen again. Following the forum post, enthusiasts scoured the internet for any evidence of the Ningen's existence. One notable piece of evidence was a Google Earth image from 2005 that some believed showed the creature, although skeptics argued that it was merely an oddly shaped iceberg. A YouTube video released by a Japanese chemical research company also fueled speculation. The video featured various sea creatures, and towards the end, a large, unidentified creature with small eyes and a wide, smile-like mouth was shown on the ocean floor. While some viewers claimed this was evidence of the Ningen, others suggested it could be a known species, such as a snaggletooth snake eel. Several other diving videos have surfaced over the years, showing large sea creatures that some believe to be Ningen. Despite these claims, the existence of the Ningen remains unproven, and the legend continues to be a topic of fascination and debate among cryptozoology enthusiasts and skeptics alike. Odd radio circles, ORCs, are a type of astronomical object that was first discovered in 2019. These large, unexplained phenomena have been observed only at radio wavelengths and appear as circular features with bright edges. As of April 2021, astronomers have identified 5 such ORCs. They are visible in radio wavelengths, but not in infrared or X-ray wavelengths. They have a circular appearance, often with brightened edges. The origin and nature of ORCs remain a mystery. Some astronomers speculate that ORCs could represent a new class of astronomical objects. Possible explanations include shock waves from events like supernova, jets from active galactic nuclei, or phenomena related to the large-scale structure of the universe. However, there is no consensus yet, and their discovery is still too recent for definitive conclusions. The scientific community continues to study ORCs in hopes of uncovering their nature and significance. It's also possible that they are naturally occurring objects without any special significance beyond their existence. Next up, we delve into the curious case of the Ohio City serial pooper. Within a quiet community in Toronto, Canada, an unknown individual has been defecating on people's property. One resident, Judy, mentioned, "Sometimes he has a Tim Hortons coffee cup in his hand so he can use the washroom at Tim Hortons." An article from 2018 detailed the situation, noting that posters had been placed around the neighborhood. These posters depicted a rather ordinary-looking man and warned residents with the message, "Please be aware, this man is defecating publicly in the neighborhood early in the morning." The police have an active investigation to identify him. To this day, it appears the individual has never been caught. So, the mysterious serial pooper may still be haunting the streets of Toronto, leaving his unsanitary mark and continuing to perplex the community. In the late 2010s, a striking Craigslist post surfaced involving the act of donating blood for use in a satanic ritual. The group behind the post claimed to have taken the lives of 5 people and received blood donations from 10 others. The post included a full address and the time when the ritual was supposed to take place. When the police were notified, they visited the address and found 4 men standing over a pentagram made of what was later determined to be human blood. If you're wondering what the mystery is, it's the entire event itself. Many believe it to have been a hoax, as the original Craigslist post cannot be found, nor are there any details about the individuals arrested. Searching for Craigslist satanic ritual yields articles about the Craigslist killer and their supposed involvement in a satanic cult, but nothing that fits the description given by the Reddit user. This leaves the true nature of the event shrouded in mystery. In 1960, in Finland, a woman named Hilkka Saarinen went missing before being found inside an oven. Hilkka was 33 years old at the time of her disappearance and lived with her husband, Pentti, in a large wooden house she inherited from her grandparents. The couple had 5 children, but due to Pentti's violent habits, all of them were taken away by the state and placed in foster homes. Hilkka herself was frequently a victim of Pentti's violent outbursts. He often returned home drunk, beat her, and threatened to kill her in a way that couldn't be traced. On December 25th, the couple's eldest son decided to visit home with a classmate, although he had told his parents he'd arrive on the 26th. When the boys entered the unlocked house, they found Pentti stepping out of the kitchen and locking the door behind him. Surprised by their early arrival, Pentti mumbled to himself. When asked about Hilkka, he claimed she had left the previous night while he was asleep. Throughout the boys' stay, Pentti displayed signs of nervousness and paranoia, and they noticed a noticeable scrape on his knuckles. The son's classmate, sensing something sinister, decided to leave early. Over the years, the son revisited his parents' home multiple times, trying to find clues about his mother's disappearance. In 1966, the son sent a letter to the police stating, "I suspect that my father knows more about the disappearance of my mother than he has told me. He has clearly opened the oven and shut it again." However, the oven had not been used in 7 to 8 years before this. "My father was cleaning in the dark, even though another room was lit. I think the oven should be dismantled. My father could do anything." Unfortunately, the police disregarded the letter. In another attempt to get the police's attention, the son wrote an article published in a magazine in 1967 titled, "I Suspect My Father is a Murderer." After the article was published, Pentti and the son met, and Pentti simply said, "Let's both just mind our own business." It wasn't until 1972, when police were ordered to revisit past cold cases, that the incident would be re-examined. Authorities went to Pentti's home and dismantled the family's oven. During this time, Pentti was taken to a police station. Inside the oven, police found it was completely filled with sand, and buried about 4 feet deep was the mummified head of a woman. Further digging revealed the entire body, which the son identified as his mother. Pentti was taken to court, where it was determined that he did not intentionally cause his wife's death, and he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. However, he served only 1 year of his sentence. The Supreme Court revisited the case, claiming that neither the cause nor manner of Hilkka's death was known, and one could no longer be sentenced for accidental killings after 12 years. Pamela Buckley and James Freund were 2 murder victims who remained unidentified for 45 years. It is believed that before their untimely deaths, they were traveling around the United States and ended up in South Carolina, where they were killed. James was 29 years old, and Pamela was 24 years old at the time of their deaths. James was shot 3 times in the chest, while Pamela was shot once in the chest and again through her neck. It wasn't until 2021 that the 2 were identified, but the perpetrator remains unknown. Investigators believe that James and Pamela were killed in a vehicle hijacking incident that likely involved a hitchhiker. On August 9, 1976, it is thought that as the hitchhiker was about to exit the vehicle, he shot both James and Pamela in the back. Authorities determined that the weapon used was a revolver. The bodies were discovered around 6 a.m. Once the identities of the 2 were discovered, it was revealed that Pamela had married early in her life, but had quickly divorced. Some investigators initially suspected her ex-husband might have been responsible for the murders, but this theory was quickly dismissed. Others speculated that serial killer Henry Lee Lucas might have been the culprit. Lucas himself even told police that he was in South Carolina at the time of James and Pamela's deaths, but police were skeptical, as Lucas was notorious for giving false confessions. Lucas ultimately died of a heart attack in 2001 and was never convicted for this particular crime. To this day, the identity of the murderer remains unknown. Potomsky Crater is a mysterious geological formation located in Siberia, Russia. It can't really be considered an unsolved mystery, so I'll keep it super short and just tell you what this entry is about. Discovered in 1949 by a local geologist, this crater is characterized by its unusual appearance, a circular depression surrounded by a series of concentric rings of limestone blocks, creating a structure that resembles a giant natural stone amphitheater. The most widely accepted scientific explanation is that it is a result of natural geological processes. The crater is believed to have formed from the erosion of limestone, combined with the action of underground water, which created the concentric rings of stone that surround it. However, the unique and symmetrical nature of the formation has obviously raised theories that it's aliens, ancient civilization, and what have you. The concept of phone calls made from beyond the grave is the idea that centers around reports of individuals receiving phone calls from deceased loved ones. These mysterious calls are often characterized by strange occurrences, such as receiving calls from numbers that are no longer in service, or hearing the voice of a deceased person on the other end. While these incidents are often dismissed as hoaxes or explained away by technical glitches, they remain a part of the broader discussion of paranormal activity. On September 6, 1987, the Playboy channel was hijacked during the airing of a film. The hijacker displayed a message on the screen: "Thus saith the Lord thy God, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." The religious content and technical clues left behind by the jamming signal led investigators to the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN. Police eventually arrested Thomas Haney, an engineer at CBN, on suspicions of his involvement. The clues allowed investigators to identify the brand of transmitter used in the video, and Haney was the engineer on duty at the time. Haney was ultimately convicted of satellite piracy, but he pleaded innocent. CBN was adamant that the case against Haney was entirely circumstantial, as there were no witnesses and the signal couldn't be traced back to an exact point of origin. Authorities reenacted the incident using CBN's equipment, but the result differed from the original hijacking. CBN also stated that they did not supply Haney with equipment powerful enough to jam the Playboy signal. No footage of the broadcast hijacking has ever resurfaced. Since there wasn't a large audience viewing the channel at the time, it's unlikely anyone has archived the footage. In the 1990s, the television series Unsolved Mysteries received a threatening postcard warning the crew not to tell a certain story. The postcard read, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. If you come to Ohio, El Sickoy will pay." It was sent from Columbus with no return address and signed by the Circleville writer. Circleville, a small town about 25 miles south of Columbus, was experiencing a series of disturbing letters similar to the postcard. These letters circulated for about 2 decades, filled with unhinged and personal details about the residents. The sender, known locally as the Watcher, often targeted Mary Gillespie, a bus driver accused by the Watcher of having an affair with the school superintendent. One letter to Mary read, "I know where you live. I've been observing your house and know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it serious." The writer demanded Mary end the alleged affair. Mary kept the letter to herself but saved it, just in case. A week later, her husband Ron received a similar letter informing him of the affair and threatening his life if he did nothing to stop it. The letters and the supposed affair quickly became the talk of the town. Ron soon received another letter. "Ron Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Make her admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out." Mary and Ron decided to involve Ron's sister, her husband Paul, and Paul's sister. Mary suspected someone and proposed a plan to scare the sender. Paul mentioned they sent 4 or 5 non-violent letters, simply stating they knew who the Watcher was. This seemed to work, as the letters stopped for a while. In August 1977, Ron received a phone call from an anonymous caller, which seemingly confirmed his suspicions about the Watcher. He told his family he was going to confront the person, grabbed his gun, and left in the family's pickup truck. On his way, he lost control of the vehicle and hit a tree, dying on impact. At the scene, police discovered Ron's gun had been fired once, but there was no clear explanation as to why. His death was ruled an accident, though letters soon circulated accusing the sheriff of a cover-up. Ron's brother-in-law Paul claimed the sheriff initially agreed there was foul play, but then changed his story. Ron's blood alcohol level was found to be 1.5 times the legal limit, which was strange as he rarely drank. After Ron's death, the letters resumed, and both Mary and the superintendent admitted to their relationship. In 1983, strange signs appeared on Mary's bus route. Mary tore one down, finding a box with a pistol rigged as a makeshift trap. The gun's serial number had been removed, but police traced it back to Paul. Despite Paul's protests of innocence, he was arrested and tried for attempted murder. Although a handwriting specialist claimed the letters matched Paul's handwriting, Paul had an alibi for the day the gun trap was set. During his trial, evidence not previously mentioned came to light. Another bus driver saw a suspicious man near where the sign was posted, but this lead was never followed up. Despite the evidence and Paul's solid alibi, he was found guilty and sentenced to prison. Even after Paul's imprisonment, the letters continued. The prison warden confirmed Paul could not have sent them. Paul himself received a letter while in prison, stating, "Now when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of there? I told you 2 years ago when we set them up. They stay set up, don't you listen at all?" Journalist Martin Yant accessed the sheriff's file on Paul and discovered an interview with another bus driver who saw a man near the site of the trap. This evidence was never pursued. To this day, the identity of the watcher remains unknown, with many twists and turns leaving the case unresolved. This entry concerns a purported lost adult episode featuring classic cartoon characters Popeye and Betty Boop. Allegedly, this short was shown only once, never to be seen again. In September 1938, Max Fleischer, the creator of the two characters, wanted to throw a party for animators who had moved from the New York studio to the one in Florida. As a thank you and an additional gag gift, attendees viewed a fully animated video complete with voice actors, music score, and stylized backgrounds of Betty giving Popeye an extremely warm welcome after he visited her in Miami. Apparently, Popeye ate his signature spinach towards the end. After the showing, the short was supposedly locked in a safe at Fleischer Studios in Florida. It remained there until 1942, when the Fleischer brothers were ousted by Paramount Pictures executives, and the short seemingly vanished. The topic of this lost episode only became widely known in 2003. Some people claim to have seen clips of it in a compilation tape of various adult cartoons from the 1980s. The current whereabouts of the original short and its fate remain unknown, leading some to believe the story is entirely fabricated. Quantum immortality is a speculative concept derived from quantum mechanics and the many worlds interpretation of quantum theory. According to this idea, a person might achieve a form of immortality through a unique quantum process. The concept originates from the many worlds interpretation proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in the 1950s, which suggests that every quantum event creates a branching of the universe into multiple, parallel worlds. The theory of quantum immortality extends this idea to human consciousness and survival. It posits that if the many worlds interpretation is correct, then every possible outcome of a quantum event actually occurs in some branch of the universe. For instance, if a person faces a life-threatening situation, such as a fatal accident, the many worlds theory suggests that in some branches of reality, the person survives due to quantum fluctuations, while in others, they do not. Quantum immortality proposes that a person's consciousness might only be present in the branches where they survive. This means that, from the perspective of their own experience, they would never encounter their own death. Essentially, their consciousness would continuously hop into a parallel universe where they continue to exist while their death occurs in other parallel worlds. Primordial black holes are a fascinating yet speculative idea in astrophysics, suggesting that black holes could have formed in the very early universe, just moments after the Big Bang. Unlike stellar black holes, which are created from collapsing stars, primordial black holes are theorized to have arisen from fluctuations in the density of matter in the early universe. These black holes could range in size from as small as atomic particles to several times the mass of the Sun. The theory proposes that if the universe had regions of exceptionally high density, these could have collapsed into black holes almost immediately after the Big Bang. Although primordial black holes are intriguing, detecting them is incredibly difficult. They might be too small to see directly, and their effects can be subtle. Researchers look for indirect signs such as gravitational lensing, where light from distant stars is bent by the black holes, or even the faint glow of Hawking radiation, which black holes are predicted to emit. The idea of primordial black holes also has implications for dark matter research, as they could potentially make up a portion of the dark matter in the universe. The Princes in the Tower refers to the apparent murder of brothers Edward V of England and Richard of Shrewsbury. These two boys were the only sons of Elizabeth Woodville and King Edward IV. After their father's death in 1483, when Edward and Richard were 12 and 9 years old respectively, they were sent to the Tower of London by their uncle, in preparation for Edward Fee's upcoming coronation. However, before the young boy could be crowned, both he and his brother were declared illegitimate. This allowed their uncle, the Duke of Gloucester, to take the throne. The last sighting of the two boys was inside the tower, and it remains unclear what happened to them. The prevailing theory is that they were murdered, but their bodies were never found. Many suspect their uncle, who became King Richard III, had them killed to secure his claim to the throne. This theory is supported by the fact that Richard had much to gain from their deaths. He could prevent the influential Woodville family from gaining power through Edward, and he could pass the crown down to his own son, keeping the power within his own family. There are a few accounts of young men throughout history claiming to be either Richard or Edward, but these claims are largely baseless and assumed to be pretenders seeking attention. If the boys were indeed killed, it's tough to say who performed the act. In the 1670s, workers remodeling the Tower of London found two small human skeletons stuffed into a wooden box buried 10 feet under a staircase. These bones were examined in the 1930s and were concluded to belong to children around the age of 10 to 13, which aligns with Edward and Richard's ages at the time. However, the examination was criticized for its assumptions, and many bones were missing or damaged. Despite these findings, there is no definitive proof that the skeletons belonged to the princes. Additionally, the examiners did not determine whether the bones were male or female, leaving the mystery unsolved to this day. Pseudo-Neros, or false Neros, is a term used to describe individuals in ancient Rome who falsely claimed to be the infamous Emperor Nero, or who were mistaken for him. The term is most commonly associated with several historical figures who emerged during and after Nero's reign, exploiting the emperor's notorious reputation for their own gain or to create political turmoil. Nero, the fifth emperor of Rome, ruled from 37 to 68 CE and was known for his tyrannical rule, extravagant lifestyle, and persecution of Christians. After his death in 68 CE, a power vacuum and unrest in the empire led to several impostors claiming to be Nero or to be closely associated with him. These impostors, often referred to as pseudo-Neros, were usually individuals who sought to capitalize on the chaos following Nero's death. One notable example is a slave named Euphorbus, who claimed to be Nero and led a rebellion in Asia Minor in the early 2nd century CE. Euphorbus was quickly recognized as an impostor and was eventually captured and executed. Another example is the case of a man named Terentius Maximus, who in the early 1st century CE also claimed to be Nero. These impostors typically relied on the widespread belief that Nero had survived his supposed death and was living in hiding. The phenomenon of pseudo-Neros reflects the significant impact that Nero's reputation had on Roman society. Nero's legacy of cruelty and excess created a fertile ground for pretenders to exploit, and these false claimants often attracted followers who were either disillusioned with the current regime or hopeful for a return to the perceived stability of Nero's rule. The Kerala Red Rain phenomenon was a blood rain event that occurred in Wayanad district of southern Indian state Kerala on Monday, 15th of July 1957, and the color subsequently turned yellow, and also 25th of July to 23rd of September 2001, when heavy downpours of red-colored rain fell sporadically in Kerala, staining clothes pink. Initial theories range from desert dust and industrial pollution to more exotic ideas such as extraterrestrial origin. Scientists collected samples of the red rain and discovered that the water contained high concentrations of red particles. Upon closer examination, these particles were identified as spores from a type of algae or lichen. The spores had a red pigment, which explained the color of the rain. Despite this explanation, the red rain event sparked a flurry of speculation and interest. Some researchers proposed that the spores could have been brought to Earth by a meteor explosion in the atmosphere, suggesting a potential extraterrestrial link. Further studies by Indian and international scientists have largely concluded that the red rain was caused by terrestrial algae spores, likely originating from local sources. The exact mechanism of how these spores became so concentrated in the rainwater remains unknown. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre occurred in Chicago on February 14, 1929, when 7 members of Bugs Moran's gang were gunned down in a garage by 4 unknown individuals, 2 of whom were dressed as police officers. It's widely presumed that Bugs Moran himself was the primary target. This event was spurred by rising tensions among gangs over control of illegal alcohol traffic during Prohibition. In the 1920s and early 1930s, the U.S. prohibited the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcohol, creating a lucrative opportunity for gangsters like Al Capone to profit from illegal alcohol sales. Bugs Moran's largely Irish gang, which controlled the North Side, resented Al Capone's gang operating in the same area. At 10:30 a.m. on Valentine's Day, 7 of Moran's men were lured into a garage at 2122 North Clark Street on the north side of Chicago. The culprits had expected Bugs Moran and no more than 3 of his men, but ended up gunning down the group of 7 with 2 Thompson submachine guns and 2 shotguns. Several witnesses reported that 2 of the perpetrators were dressed as police officers. Some investigators suggested these men were from another gang on good terms with Capone, while others believed they were police officers seeking revenge for the murder of another officer's son. Among the 7 victims were Bugs Moran's second-in-command and brother-in-law, as well as the gang's bookkeeper and business manager. One victim, despite sustaining 14 bullet wounds, was still alive when the police arrived. He was transported to a hospital where doctors temporarily stabilized him and police attempted to question him. However, he simply said, "No one shot me," before dying. The massacre shocked the city and the nation, with both authorities and the public immediately suspecting Al Capone, who was in Florida at the time. Investigators suggested that the massacre was prompted by Moran's gang hijacking a shipment of high-end whiskey from Canada that belonged to Capone. The 2 sides had been clashing over the bootlegging trade, with Moran even trying to take over some of Capone's businesses. Within days of the massacre, Capone received a summons to testify before the Chicago grand jury on charges of violating Prohibition laws. He claimed illness and did not show up. It was widely believed within law enforcement that Capone orchestrated the massacre. A significant development tied to the massacre occurred when Wisconsin police were tipped off about the whereabouts of Fred "Killer" Burke, a notorious contract killer and robber. During a raid on Burke's location, police found a massive trunk containing a bulletproof vest, over $300 in recently stolen bonds, pistols, 2 Thompsons, 2 shotguns, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Forensic ballistics, a relatively new science at the time, revealed that the 2 Thompsons were the same ones used in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. However, Burke was never caught during this raid, and his direct involvement in the massacre was never proven. Many mobsters were suspected of being the gunmen, including 2 prime suspects from the Sicilian Mafia, but no one was ever found guilty for the shooting. Seth Rich was a 27-year-old employee of the Democratic National Committee who was murdered on July 10, 2016, at around 4:30 a.m. He was shot twice in the back and died about an hour later. The culprit or culprits responsible for his death were never identified or captured. Following Rich's death, several conspiracy theories emerged, including connections to the DNC email leak in 2016. However, Rich's family and colleagues strongly refuted these claims, describing them as fake news. They criticized media outlets for exploiting Seth's death for financial gain. Notably, Fox News was among the media sources that propagated these theories. The network was forced to retract its statements after failing to provide evidence to support its claims. In 2018, Seth Rich's family sued Fox News for fabricating a defamatory story. The parties eventually reached a settlement in 2020. On the night Seth was shot, he had left a bar around 1:30 a.m. He was attacked around 4:30 a.m. in the Bloomingdale neighborhood, which was known for frequent robberies. Seth was immediately transported to a hospital, but he succumbed to his injuries. Police speculated that he might have been the target of a robbery. Seth's mother reported to NBC that there was evidence of a struggle before his death, as his face, hands, and knees were bruised. Stephen Smith, a 19-year-old from South Carolina, was found dead in 2015 from blunt force trauma. His death was initially listed as a hit and run, but with no suspects and no leads, the case eventually went cold. However, in 2021, Stephen's case received renewed attention due to potential links with the notorious Murdaugh family. The Murdaugh family, known for their influence in South Carolina, had several members serving as district attorneys from the 1920s to the early 2000s. Richard Alex Murdaugh, a key figure in the family, was involved in numerous investigations related to murder, corruption, and insurance fraud. The family even founded a nationally recognized law firm in Hampton, South Carolina. In 2019, Alex's son, Paul Murdaugh, and others in the family were implicated in a fatal boating accident. During this period, Alex faced accusations of favoritism toward his family in legal matters. In June 2021, Alex Murdaugh was charged with killing his wife and son, Paul. He was also found to have embezzled money from his law firm, leading to his resignation in September 2021. The Murdaugh family's activities and scandals have attracted significant media attention, prompting discussions about their possible involvement in other cases, including Stephen Smith's. When authorities investigated Alex Murdaugh's case, they discovered evidence suggesting a potential connection between the Murdaugh family and Stephen Smith's death. Stephen Smith, who was openly gay, was reportedly in contact with Buster Murdaugh, Alex's oldest son. Some speculate that Paul Murdaugh, who was killed by Alex, might have been involved in Stephen's death. The motives for such involvement remain unclear, and while some believe Paul could be framed, others think Alex might know crucial details or be responsible for Stephen's murder. As of now, the case remains unresolved and ongoing, with ongoing investigations into potential connections between Stephen Smith's death and the Murdaugh family. In the New England region of the United States, there are extensive networks of old stone walls that were originally estimated to stretch across 250,000 miles in the 1930s. This estimate is now believed to be quite conservative, with current assessments suggesting that the walls may be twice that length. These walls are accompanied by distinctive stone structures that resemble caves or huts, which have puzzled historians and archaeologists for decades. Approximately 800 unique stone structures have been discovered in New England, structures that are not found elsewhere in North America. These structures vary in size, typically ranging from 15 to 30 feet in length, and are usually 10 feet wide and 10 feet tall. One notable type of structure is the beehive chamber, which features a cone-like shape and includes smoke holes for ventilation. Inside these chambers, there are often shelves and benches made from stone, and some are built into hills, while others are isolated. Historically, these stone structures have been attributed to either early European colonists or Native Americans. Some theories suggest that they were used as root cellars, smokehouses, or general storage facilities. However, records from early New England colonists indicate that these structures existed before European arrival, which suggests they might have been built by Native Americans. The debate continues over the exact purpose of these chambers. Many archaeologists argue that the interiors are too complex and well-crafted to serve simple functions like storage. The effort required to transport large stones and construct these chambers raises questions about why such significant resources were used for these structures, rather than building closer to home or within established villages. The complexity and scale of these structures remain subjects of intrigue and investigation. Tara Calico was a 19-year-old woman who disappeared on September 20th, 1988, in New Mexico. Tara had set out on her regular bike ride along New Mexico State Road 47 at around 9:30 a.m., usually accompanied by her mother, Pat. On this particular day, Tara decided to ride alone despite her mother's concerns about a suspected stalker. Pat had advised Tara to carry mace, but Tara refused. When Tara did not return home as planned, Pat began searching for her along State Road 47 without success and eventually contacted the police. Authorities discovered Tara's Sony Walkman and a cassette tape along the road, but no trace of Tara's bicycle. Witnesses reported seeing Tara riding her bike that morning, but did not recall seeing her abducted or entering any vehicle. Almost a year later, in June 1989, a Polaroid photo surfaced in Florida, showing a young woman and a boy. The photo was found in a parking lot and was reportedly left behind by a windowless Toyota cargo van driven by a man with a mustache in his 30s. Experts determined the photo was taken after May 1989, suggesting that Tara might still be alive at that time. Tara's mother, Pat, believed the girl in the photo was Tara, and relatives of a boy named Michael Henley, who had also been abducted in New Mexico, thought the boy in the picture might be Michael. However, there was no consensus on the identity of the boy. In 1998, Tara was officially declared dead, and her death was ruled a homicide. Years later, in 2018, Valencia County Sheriff Rene Rivera suggested that two teenagers might have accidentally hit Tara's bike, causing a serious injury. Fearing repercussions, the teenagers might have moved Tara into their truck and enlisted two other men to dispose of her. Rivera speculated that Tara might be buried somewhere in Valencia County, but did not disclose the suspects' identities to avoid tipping them off. Despite these theories and ongoing frustrations from Tara's family over the lack of progress, the case remains open, with no arrests made to date. This entry is more of an urban legend than unsolved mystery, so I don't know why it's here, but I'll just cover it anyway, I guess. Tinom is described as a blind, decrepit old man. Well, at first it appears to be blind, until you notice unblinking eyes on the palm of both its hands. Not much is really known of its origin apart from the odd tale. Some people believe them to be the spirits of blind men who have been murdered in gruesome ways. One thing is for sure, although it may look like a harmless little old man, they love nothing more than the taste of human flesh or bones, still warm after being yanked out of the victim's body. There is an old tale of an elderly blind man who was walking alone down a country lane. He was approached by a bunch of spineless thugs who proceeded to violently mug him. After taking what little he had, they left him battered and bruised, lying in a pool of his own blood to die on the side of the road. In his dying breaths, he spat out these words, "If only I could have one last glance of my attackers. If only I had eyes that worked." Dying with so much hate and resent transformed his spirit into a powerful yokai. It seems the powers that be were gracious enough to grant him sight, albeit in the palm of his hands. Now he can be seen eternally roaming graveyards and country roads using his newfound vision to find his attackers. The most mysterious song on the internet. In the mid-1980s, a teenager named Darius S. recorded a mysterious song off a German radio station called NDRF, Norddeutscher Rundfunk, using a cassette recorder. Darius, an amateur DJ, was compiling a mixtape of his favorite songs when he captured this track, which remains unidentified in terms of its writer, performer, and producer. Known by various titles derived from its hard-to-decipher lyrics, it is often referred to as "Like the Wind." Identifying songs in the 1980s posed a significant challenge for music lovers, unlike today, where apps and search engines make it easy. Many tunes like this one remained unknown unless the radio DJ provided details. In 2004, Darius's older sister, Lydia, gave him a web domain for his birthday, which he used to create a site dedicated to uncovering more about the enigmatic song. This effort marked the song's first online presence. In 2017, Deadwax Records uploaded a snippet of the track to their YouTube channel. Gabriel Pinson, a friend of the label's owner, became fascinated with the song's mystery and began spreading it online, particularly on YouTube and Reddit. By 2019, a subreddit called r/The Mysterious Song was established, attracting a community of internet sleuths eager to solve the puzzle. Despite numerous leads and ongoing discussions, the song's origins remain unknown. The subreddit remains active, and there is hope that the mystery will eventually be solved. In June 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus bought a $1 million home in Westfield, New Jersey, known for its safety and tranquility. However, shortly after closing on the house, they received a chilling letter from someone identifying themselves as the Watcher. The letter was addressed to the new owners and was filled with unsettling questions and statements, such as, 6th and 57 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now. Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? I will find out. The letter included disturbing details about the Broaddus family's vehicle, renovation plans, and their children. Derek contacted both the authorities and the previous homeowners, the Woods, only to discover that they had also received a similar letter before moving out. The Woods had not experienced any further letters or issues during their 2-decade residency, which made the Broaddus family's situation even more unsettling. As renovations began, the Broaddus family noticed more strange occurrences, such as signs being torn from the yard. The second letter, which arrived soon after, was even more alarming. It specifically mentioned one of their children painting on the front porch, and detailed how the Watcher could see every movement through the house's windows and doors. Feeling increasingly unsafe, Maria and the children decided to stay in their old home, while Derek remained in the new house to monitor the situation. Despite efforts by authorities and a security firm, the identity of the Watcher remained a mystery. The Broaddus family decided to sell the house about 6 months after purchasing it. The property's reputation due to the letters led to a significant drop in value, and they ended up selling it in 2019, incurring a loss of nearly $500,000. In 2016, the family planned to demolish the house and rebuild, but the Watcher sent another threatening letter, warning of various potential disasters that could befall them, which dissuaded them from proceeding with the demolition. The final letter read, "Maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away, but makes you feel sick day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet." Despite the financial loss, the Broaddus family was relieved to move on from the haunting experience. The identity of the Westfield Watcher remains unknown to this day. The final resting place of Genghis Khan is shrouded in mystery and has yet to be discovered. Many researchers believe it's likely hidden somewhere in the sacred Mongolian mountain of Burkhan Khaldun. Legend has it that Genghis Khan wished to be buried without any markers, and to ensure this, he ordered that anyone involved in his burial be executed. It's said that over 2,000 slaves assisted in his funeral, only to be killed by soldiers afterwards. Those soldiers were then killed by another group of soldiers, who in turn were instructed to eliminate any living creature that might have witnessed the burial. In a final, chilling twist, these last soldiers then took their own lives once their task was complete. Other legends about Khan's burial include tales of his grave being beneath a river or marked by trees planted on top of it. One story from 3 decades after his death mentions a young camel buried with him. This camel's mother was later found mourning at a peculiar spot, leading some to speculate it might be his burial site. The belief that his grave is near Burkhan Khaldun stems from Khan's known practice of visiting the mountain to pray to a sky god. After the rise of the Mongol Empire, access to this sacred area was restricted to the royal Mongol family, with trespassers facing the death penalty. Uncanny Valley is a term you might recognize if you've delved into the eerie corners of YouTube. It describes a strange relationship between how human-like something appears and the emotional response it triggers. When something looks almost but not quite human, it often creates a feeling of unease or revulsion. Scientists are still puzzled by this reaction. The chart you see represents the valley, where a normal human appearance is at the peak of familiarity. The concept of Uncanny Valley dates back to 1970, introduced by robotics professor Masahiro Mori. He observed that as robots were designed to look more human, people initially reacted positively. However, once the robots became too human-like, their appearance began to elicit discomfort. The reasons behind this reaction are still unknown, but several theories exist. One theory suggests it could be an evolutionary mechanism for mate selection, where our brains instinctively avoid traits associated with low fertility, poor hormonal health, or weak immune systems. Another theory posits that these uncanny faces evoke thoughts of death, making us feel uneasy because we subconsciously perceive them as replacements for ourselves. Lastly, the resemblance of these faces to decapitated individuals with frozen expressions might also trigger a primal fear response. The Vela incident refers to a mysterious double flash of light detected by an American Vela Hotel satellite on September 22, 1979, near South Africa. The true cause of this flash remains officially unknown, with many details seemingly kept secret by various governments. The Vela satellite was designed to detect radiation from nuclear explosions on Earth and in the atmosphere. This particular satellite detected a double flash in the Indian Ocean, which is often indicative of an atmospheric nuclear explosion of 2 or 3 kilotons. When news of the event surfaced, Department of Defense suggested it was either a bomb blast or a mix of natural phenomena such as lightning or a meteor. This explanation was later revised to a low-yield nuclear explosion, but skepticism remained as there was no seismic or hydroacoustic data to support this claim. Additionally, no radioactive debris was detected in the area. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, many people believe the incident was related to a South African nuclear test. If you've never heard of Cracker Barrel, it's a cozy country-themed store that doubles as a restaurant and gift shop. This particular mystery all began with a single Facebook post. A man named Brad posted on Cracker Barrel's Facebook page, demanding to know why his wife was fired. This comment quickly became a meme, with countless people inundating Cracker Barrel's posts, all asking why Brad's wife, who had worked there for 11 years, was let go. At one point, a post on Cracker Barrel's Facebook page revealed that Brad's wife, Nanette, had been fired by a district manager named Gwen Alexander. The reason given was that she wasn't working out. Nanette was an old woman known for her hard work, putting in 50 to 60 hours a week. Since Cracker Barrel didn't provide a clear answer, Brad's Facebook post went viral, spawning the hashtag #Brad'sWife. Some people speculated that Nanette was fired due to discrimination, as she wasn't working out is quite vague. Another rumor suggested that Nanette received 3 warnings about her hygiene and was dismissed when she didn't improve. Several individuals familiar with Nanette claimed that her cleanliness was poor and that she had an unpleasant odor. This entry refers to a mysterious incident involving a woman found wandering on the Severn Bridge, which connects England and Wales, around midnight on November 27, 1988. Several police officers spotted a young woman near the motorway and decided to take her to the station. Despite their efforts to question her about her identity, origins, and reasons for being on the bridge, the woman remained silent and unresponsive, leading the police to suspect she might be deaf or have a disability. The woman was described as being between 14 and 18 years old, about 5 feet 4 inches tall, with reddish-brown hair and blue eyes. The next morning, a missing persons notice was issued, and her parents soon arrived to pick her up. Contrary to initial assumptions, the parents revealed that the woman was not deaf, nor did she have any disabilities. She was actually 22 years old and suffering from severe depression. The parents requested that her identity remain confidential, which adds to the mystery surrounding this case. The Yeti, also known as the Abominable Snowman, is a cryptid similar in appearance to Bigfoot, but is believed to reside primarily in the mountainous regions of Asia. Unlike Bigfoot, the Yeti is thought to be a bit shorter, standing around 6 feet tall. Descriptions of the Yeti often depict it as having a muscular build and weighing between 400 and 600 pounds. One notable account comes from 1921 when journalist Henry Newman interviewed a group of British explorers who had just completed a Mount Everest expedition. These explorers claimed to have seen unusually large footprints on the mountain. When they asked their guide about the tracks, the guide referred to the creature as Meto Kangmi, which roughly translates to man-bear-snowman. Amusingly, one of the explorers initially misinterpreted Meto as filthy, but disliked the term and opted for abominable instead, thus coining the term abominable snowman. As with most cryptids, concrete evidence of the Yeti's existence is lacking, but many adventurers have sought proof. In 1960, Sir Edmund Hillary visited Mount Everest specifically to find evidence of the Yeti. He returned with a scalp he claimed belonged to the creature, but this was later debunked as a helmet-shaped hide from a serow. In another instance, a monastery in Nepal held a finger they believed to be from a Yeti. However, analysis later determined the finger was human, possibly from a monk's corpse. Even the Russian government showed interest in the Yeti, organizing a conference of Bigfoot experts in western Siberia. Biologist and Bigfoot researcher John Bender-Nagel claimed to have found evidence suggesting Yetis built nests and shelters from large tree branches. At one point, the group announced they had indisputable proof of the Yeti's existence. However, several members later concluded the evidence was fake, noting that the branches supposedly twisted by a Yeti were actually cut with man-made tools. Additionally, the trees with missing branches were located near a well-traveled trail, not in a remote area where a reclusive creature like the Yeti would likely be found. 2013 EAS Zombie Hoax. On February 11, 2013, several stations in Montana and Michigan were hijacked with a local area emergency message displaying a warning of a zombie apocalypse. The first of these hijackings took place between 2:30 and 2:33 p.m. MST. On KRTV Channel 2 and 3 during an airing of The Steve Wilkos Show and during a commercial break, respectively. PBS affiliates WMNU in Marquette, Michigan, and KenW in Portales, New Mexico would soon follow on 3:55 p.m. MST. Around 5 hours later, WP got the same message at 8:35 p.m. EDT alongside KRTV2, which was their second hijacking of the same hoax message. In a similar incident, a morning show on WIZM FM in La Crosse, Wisconsin, used the recording of the infamous message with the host's reactions and laughters to the fake warning. Apparently, they did not edit out the same tones, so the broadcast was relayed into TV station WKBT-DT during its commercial break, triggering the EAS. The hacker was caught the next day. It was then revealed that a backdoor attack allowed the hacker access to the security of the EAS equipment. This was thanks to poor protection from station equipment, as they have neglected to change their default factory's logins and passwords. The voice message that repeated over and over states the following text. Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living. Follow the messages on screen that will be updated as information becomes available. Do not attempt to approach or apprehend these bodies, as they are considered extremely dangerous.